Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Paranormal M. Thanks for joining me tonight. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe, and if you end up liking the stories, don't forget to leave a like on the video. The first story comes from someone who spent years trying to figure out why strange things keep happening around them wherever they go. It started when they were young, and even now they still hear things, see things, and experience stuff they can't explain. It's a really interesting one, so let's get started. Hope you all sleep well tonight. I've been turning something over in my mind, and I want to tell you about it honestly, because I still do not fully understand it myself. You know how people always talk about haunted houses, haunted hotels, haunted old buildings? I keep wondering whether sometimes it is not the place at all, whether a person can be the one carrying it. Not in a dramatic movie sense, not like something is living inside them, but more like certain people seem to move through life with strange things trailing close behind. The reason I ask is because of my own experiences. Ever since I was little, I've had moments that I cannot explain away. I've heard voices when no one was there, quiet murmurs and whispers that felt close enough to answer back to. I've seen people, actual human figures, not just shadows in the corner of my eye. I've watched objects end up in different places even when I had not left the room. Sometimes a strong scent will suddenly appear right beside me, perfume, smoke, something sharp and unfamiliar, then vanish as quickly as it came. I've even had dreams that felt paranormal in nature, only to wake up and realize parts of them had somehow spilled into real life. There is a lot more, honestly. Enough that I could go on for hours. I moved around a lot growing up, and the strange things seemed to follow me from house to house. The first time I ever saw someone who was not supposed to be there was in my childhood home. I still remember how real it felt. After that, every place I lived in had its own moments. Different walls, different streets, same uneasy feeling that something odd could happen at any time. Then I moved into the house I live in now, back in 2018, and for a while it felt different, calmer. I remember thinking maybe I had finally landed somewhere untouched by all of it. Over the past couple of years, there were still a few little things I could not explain, but nothing like before. Nothing intense. But lately, that has changed. Over the last year especially, it feels like this house has slowly stirred awake, and in the past few weeks, it has become hard to ignore. The activity feels familiar now, almost like I've stepped back into an old pattern I hoped I had outgrown. I used to joke that every home I lived in must be haunted, but when you really stop and think about it, what are the chances of that? This house is not even particularly old. It was built in 2012. Some of the other places I lived were much older, so I used to comfort myself with that old haunted house stereotype. But this place does not fit that story, and still, here we are. That is what keeps pulling me back to the same question. Maybe it is not the houses. I've always loved paranormal stories, probably because they feel weirdly familiar to me. I've read so many accounts from people who say they visited a haunted place and something followed them home. I've also heard from people like my friend Mira, who believes some people are simply more open to this kind of thing, more sensitive, more receptive, whatever word you want to use. Empaths, psychics, intuitives, people who seem to pick up what others do not. So I guess that is what I'm asking you. Do you think some people are haunted in their own way? Do you think certain people carry an energy that draws strange things in? Or do you think there is another explanation entirely? Because after everything I've experienced, I still do not have an answer. I just know that wherever I go, the unexplained seems to find me eventually. A couple of weeks ago, something happened that I still can't make sense of. I live right next door to my sister, and one evening she went out with her partner for her birthday. My younger sister was looking after the kids that night. She'd picked them up, brought them back, and when she pulled into the driveway, I noticed they were all just standing outside instead of going in. So I stepped out to see what was going on. My family has always loved anything to do with space, and it was one of those really clear nights where the sky just seemed wide open. My younger sister was pointing out constellations to my niece, who's 8, and my nephew, who's 5. She was also showing them satellites moving across the sky. It was such a lovely little moment, so I stayed out there with them for a while. And just to be clear, none of them had gone into the house yet. While we were all standing there looking up, I suddenly heard a few high-pitched meows. My sister's kitten is called Milo, and I know his meow straight away. So I said to my niece, "I can hear Milo. He's not outside, is he? He's not supposed to be out here." She looked up toward the house, paused for a second, and then pointed to the upstairs window and said, "He's in the window." And honestly, there he was, sitting right on the upstairs bedroom windowsill. Clear as day, I could see him. My niece could see him. Then my nephew came over when he realized we were all staring at something, and he pointed up too and said he could see Milo. My younger sister looked up as well, heard the meowing, and joked that he must want to come outside and look at the stars with us. So at that point, all 4 of us had heard the meowing, and all 4 of us had seen what looked exactly like Milo sitting in that upstairs window. About 20 minutes later, I went back into my house, and my sister took the kids inside theirs. Then I got a call from her. She said, "You are not going to believe this. When I came in, I could hear scratching in the kitchen. I opened the kitchen door, and Milo had been shut in there the whole time." I just went quiet, because we had all seen him upstairs. Not one of us thought we might have imagined it. It was so clear. So I asked her if maybe the kitchen door had been left open a crack and he'd gotten out, but she said no. She had to actually press the handle down to open it and let him out. So unless that kitten somehow opened the door himself, wandered upstairs, sat in the window meowing at us, and then let himself back in and shut the door behind him, there's just no normal explanation for it. And that's the part that still gets me. I'm not someone who jumps to wild conclusions. I've had strange experiences since I was a kid, and so has my younger sister, so unusual things don't really shock me anymore. My other sister, the one who lives next door, has never really been into anything paranormal, but lately, even she's been having some unsettling experiences in her house. Still, I'm a very logical person. I always try to find a reasonable explanation first. I want there to be one. Sometimes there is. But with this, I've gone over it again and again, and I still can't explain what we saw that night. It's been sitting with me ever since. I honestly don't know whether it was some kind of glitch, some bizarre misperception, or whether that cat has powers none of us are ready for. But whatever it was, all I know is this: we saw Milo in that upstairs window, and somehow, at the exact same time, he was locked in the kitchen. I've been carrying a lot lately, and I think that's where this story really starts. You know how sometimes life doesn't just hand you one hard thing? It drops a whole armful of them in your lap at once? That's kind of where I've been. A few weeks ago, my mother-in-law took a bad fall and hurt her back. Then, not long after that, a close friend of my husband and brother-in-law passed away. It's been heavy. Really heavy. So through all of that, Wyeth, who's been with me since I was about 5, and Tomas, his brother, have been doing everything they can to keep me from sinking too far into the sadness. And their preferred method, apparently, is being absolute clowns. Their favorite thing to do is make faces at people who overstay their welcome, or throw in little running commentary while we're trying to watch something. Just enough to break the tension. Just enough to make me want to laugh when I probably shouldn't. One day, my mother-in-law's sister came by to visit after the fall. Now, I don't personally have anything against her, but she clearly decided a while back that she doesn't care for me. That's her business. I'm not losing sleep over it. But she came in talking and talking and talking, mostly about herself. Her husband had passed a few months earlier, and she kept saying she couldn't bear to lose my mother-in-law too. And yes, I understood the grief in that. I did. But then she veered off into a long story about needing repairs done on her roof, something about mice in the attic, and then, out of nowhere, she started talking about the ghosts in her house being noisy and how she'd had to tell them to settle down. That part nearly got me, because I've been to her house. She does have spirits around her, sure. Most people do. But in her case, most of them are old pets she won't let go of, or pieces of people she just refuses to let rest. So no, it wasn't exactly some haunted house emergency. While she was saying all this, everybody else was trying to stay polite and serious, and there were Wyeth and Tomas standing beside her, pulling faces like children in the back pew of a church. Hand motions, exaggerated expressions, the whole bit, just doing their best to crack me. And somehow I held it together. But then she said she could see and hear ghosts. The second those words left her mouth, Wyeth and Tomas just lost patience completely. They got right up near her, yelling, waving, making a full spectacle of themselves. If she really could see and hear them, she had every opportunity in the world to prove it right there. She never reacted. So, in my opinion, she can't see or hear a thing. And that only confirmed what I already suspected. Because if she truly could, then her husband would have had no trouble getting her attention. Instead, he's had to keep trying to reach someone who actually can hear him. And yes, I can. No, I'm not telling her. There are a couple reasons for that. First, after my husband's grandmother died, she and another sister sent my mother-in-law and her sons a cruel letter. I never read it myself, because my husband knows me well enough to worry about exactly how I'd respond. And honestly, that's fair. But I know enough to know it was ugly, and I know my name was in it too. Second, she has gone out of her way to pretend she never knew I'm pagan. She acted shocked when it came up, like it was some alarming new discovery, and tried to make my mother-in-law uneasy about me because of it. Well, Wyeth took that personally, and because Wyeth is exactly who he is, he decided that if she was going to play dumb and act like she never knew, then he was going to start dropping in at her house from time to time and stirring things up a little. Nothing too wild, just enough to rattle the air and keep things interesting. Then Tomas found out why, and naturally, he joined in. And the funniest part is, neither of them has ever been thrown out or driven off. Not by her, not by any spiritual force, not by anything in that house. According to them, she never reacts, not to them, and not even to the spirits that are actually there. So yes, I know it's petty, but I'd be lying to you if I said watching them mess with her doesn't make me laugh. You know, there are some places in Bangkok that feel completely ordinary in the daytime, but once night falls, they seem to carry a memory in the air. New Phetchaburi Road is one of those places. Let me tell you why. Late on the night of September 24th, 1990, just after 10 o'clock, that road became the center of one of the most horrifying tragedies the city had ever seen. A tanker truck loaded with liquefied petroleum gas lost control near the expressway exit and overturned in the middle of a busy stretch of traffic. In seconds, what had been a normal Bangkok night turned into chaos. A huge amount of gas spilled across the road, and then it caught fire. What happened next was almost beyond imagination. A massive fireball surged through the street, swallowing cars, motorcycles, shop fronts, and apartment buildings. People who had just been sitting in traffic or going about their night were suddenly trapped in an inferno. By the time everything was over, around 80 people had lost their lives, many more were badly injured, and entire parts of the neighborhood had been burned into ruin. The survivors who witnessed it never forgot what they saw. Some described people stumbling through the flames so badly burned they were barely recognizable. Those images stayed with the city, and honestly, once you hear about them, they stay with you too. But the story didn't end with the fire. Over the years, the disaster became woven into Bangkok's ghost lore, and part of the reason is the place itself. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, that area of New Phetchaburi was full of nightlife. There were bars, clubs, massage parlors, crowded dorms, cheap rented rooms, and all the restless energy of a city that never really slept. In Thai belief, places like that could already feel spiritually heavy, layered with desire, sorrow, exhaustion, and karma. So when so many people died there so suddenly and so violently, people believed something had been left behind. That's where the idea of Pi Tai Hong comes in. These are spirits of people who died unnatural, sudden deaths, especially those who never received proper rites. In Thai folk belief, those spirits don't always move on peacefully. Sometimes they linger. Sometimes they call out. Sometimes they make themselves known in ways you can't quite explain. One place that comes up again and again in these stories is the Bangkok Palace Hotel, not far from where the explosion happened. Officially, there's no proof connecting the hotel itself to the disaster in any supernatural way. But that hasn't stopped the stories. Guests and staff have spoken about footsteps in empty corridors, soft knocking on doors when nobody is there, whispers in quiet rooms, and elevators opening on their own as if someone unseen has just stepped inside. And then there's the darkest version of the tale. People say a man once woke up in his hotel room and found the person beside him no longer looked human, but like a burned body from the fire, while he himself was untouched. Whether that really happened or not, the story spread because it captured the fear people still carried, that the horror of that night had never fully left. In Thai belief, that makes sense. Spirits like Pi Tai Hom are said to affect the living through sensation, not always by appearing directly, but through smell, sound, pressure, and that uneasy feeling that tells you something is wrong even when you can't see it. And really, whether you believe in ghosts or not, these stories tell you something important. They show how deep a wound that night left on the city. When people experience sudden loss, especially on that scale, memory doesn't just stay in history books. It settles into places. It becomes ritual. It becomes folklore. It becomes the kind of story people whisper to each other when passing through after dark. That's why, even years later, people still make offerings, say prayers, and hold ceremonies for the dead. In Thai tradition, those acts matter. They help guide the spirits, yes, but they also help the living carry grief with respect. It's part comfort, part faith, and part responsibility to those who were taken too suddenly. So if you ever find yourself walking down New Phetchaburi Road late at night, and the street feels strangely quiet, or the air turns heavy, or you catch the faint scent of something burned when there's no fire in sight, you might remember this story. And maybe, just maybe, you'll feel it too. The sense that some nights in Bangkok never truly end. You know, if you walk through Causeway Bay today, it feels like pure motion. Neon, traffic, people everywhere, every corner humming with life. It is hard to imagine that one of the district's strangest stories began with something as ordinary as a marble wall. Back in the early 1980s, there was a well-known building called Winster House, finished just a few years earlier. Its entrance was lined with smooth white marble, the kind with soft gray veins running through it like frozen streams. Most people never gave it a second glance. It was just part of the building, part of the city. Then one afternoon, someone passing by stopped and noticed something odd in the stone. Hidden in the natural pattern was what looked like the face of an animal. Sharp ears, a narrow snout, a strange expression. Once that first person pointed it out, other people started looking too. And that is when things really took on a life of their own. Soon, people began saying there was not just one face, but several. Some swore they could see 6. Others insisted there were 7. Before long, the story had a name people would not forget: the 7 fox faces. What fascinates me is how quickly an ordinary wall became something people approached with caution. Neighbors stopped to stare. Shoppers slowed down. Office workers leaned in to inspect the marble for themselves. And once enough people said they saw fox-like faces, more and more others started seeing them too. The newspapers had a field day with it. Television picked it up as well. Suddenly, this was not just a curious pattern in stone. It became a city-wide rumor, then a warning, then almost a kind of omen. In those days, Hong Kong still held tightly to traditional beliefs, and stories like this could settle deep into the public imagination. Some feng shui practitioners weighed in, saying foxes carried strong yin energy. They said the number 7 was tied to misfortune, loss, and unrest. That kind of interpretation made people even more uneasy. A wall that might have been nothing more than marble and imagination began to feel charged with meaning. And then, as these stories always do, the rumors grew darker. One version said a banquet had once been held in the building, and the spirits connected to the fox faces had somehow been slighted. Not long after, a child was said to have fallen ill with a sudden fever and died. Another story told of a night watchman walking past the wall after midnight, hearing a thin sound in the air, almost like a baby crying, almost like wind slipping through a narrow space. When he looked up, people said the eye sockets in the marble seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. By morning, he had quit. There was even talk that management had arranged a tiny play area on the rooftop, meant as a peace offering to the unseen fox spirits. A few residents claimed that late at night, they saw the shapes of children on the swings, moving gently back and forth without a sound. Not solid figures, more like pale shadows that flickered at the edge of sight. Now, whether any of that happened the way people described it, no one can really prove. But that is the thing about legends like this. They do not need proof to spread. They only need a crowd, a little fear, and one image people cannot unsee. Eventually, the building management decided enough was enough. Workers came in and removed the marble wall while reporters and curious onlookers watched. People said the cracking sound of the stone breaking apart echoed through the lobby. It felt dramatic, almost ceremonial, like the city was trying to tear the story out at its root. But the story did not disappear. Even after the wall was gone, people kept telling the tale. Years later, the old building was redeveloped, and the place took on a newer, more polished look, with glass and steel replacing the old surfaces. Still, the legend of the 7 fox faces stayed behind, folded into Hong Kong's folklore. And honestly, when you think about it, there is a simple explanation. Our minds are wired to find familiar shapes in randomness, especially faces. It is a psychological effect called pareidolia. Once someone points out a pattern, your brain starts helping you believe it is really there. But I do not think that explanation takes away the power of the story. Because this was never only about marble. It was about a time and a place where superstition, media, and everyday city life all blended together. It was about how fear can gather around something silent and still, until it feels almost alive. So even though the marble wall is long gone, the story lingers. And maybe that is the part that stays with you. Not whether the fox faces were real, but how easy it is, in the right moment, to look at something ordinary and feel a chill run through you anyway. You know, years ago, back through the late 1980s and into the 1990s, a few friends and I used to head down to the entrance at Lake Illawarra, near Windang, for all-night fishing trips. It was a bit of a ritual for us. We'd drive down from our side of town, set ourselves up near the water, throw in a line, crack open a few drinks, and stay out there until dawn. It's a beautiful spot, but it always carried a strange reputation. We'd all grown up hearing the same stories, that the entrance was haunted. Most of us laughed it off. The stories usually came from fishermen, and fishermen have a gift for turning a shadow into a legend. People talked about hearing footsteps in the sand on still nights, even when no one was there. Others swore they'd heard faint voices drifting in from the surf. Some claimed they'd seen a figure moving along the shoreline, and a lot of people described that same feeling, like someone was standing just behind them, watching. At the time, I didn't put much weight on any of it. We were young, half the time we were drinking, sometimes a bit out of it, and not exactly in a state to notice every little thing around us. But even so, I'll be honest with you, there were nights when that feeling of being watched was so strong, it made the hairs on your neck stand up. Then one night, things shifted a bit. A mate of ours had a dog called Buddha. That night, Buddha came along with us, and out of nowhere he started acting up. Not playful, not restless, properly unsettled. He was growling into the scrub behind us, barking hard, pacing, staring into the dark like he could see something we couldn't. He kept it up for hours. We tried to laugh it off and said it was probably rabbits moving through the bushes because there were always plenty around there. Still, the dog never really calmed down. Over the months after that, we went back plenty of times. Buddha came along on and off and seemed completely normal again, so we stopped thinking much about it. But then came the night I still can't explain. My mate Stevie was fishing, maybe 100 meters or so away from me with Buddha beside him. It was quiet except for the water and the occasional clink of gear, and then I heard the dog start barking in the distance. Not long after that, I saw a torch beam jerking wildly through the dark. At first it was sweeping across the area like Stevie was searching for something. Then suddenly the light fixed in my direction and started bouncing fast, getting brighter and brighter. It was Stevie, sprinting flat out toward me. I'd never seen him like that. He was terrified, properly terrified. When he finally reached us, he said he'd seen a figure nearby. He described it as moving in a strange way, hunched over, like it was bending down to pick something up. Then, just like that, it vanished. Gone. No sound, no footsteps, nothing. Just there 1 second and not there the next. Another mate, Daz, and I didn't believe him. We thought he'd spooked himself in the dark, maybe seen someone real and panicked, maybe imagined the rest. But Stevie swore black and blue that what he saw wasn't normal. He said he'd never go back there again, and he never did. That was probably the point where I stopped laughing at the stories. After that, I started digging into the history of the area, and what I found only made things darker. There had been terrible events tied to that place. Reports of a human skull being found. A heartbreaking case involving a mother and her baby. Another story about a body discovered without its head. Real tragedies. Real grief. And once you know those things happened, it changes the way you stand there in the dark listening to the surf. So I keep coming back to the same question. Are these sightings just stories people pass around because the place already feels heavy? Are they born from fear? From local legend? From too many late nights and too much imagination? Or is something else there? Something tied to the sorrow that seems to cling to that stretch of water and sand? I can't tell you for certain what Stevie saw. I can't tell you what that couple saw either. But I can tell you this. Out at the entrance, in the quiet, when the wind drops and the sea goes low and restless, you can feel something. And once you've felt it for yourself, it's very hard to brush it off as nothing. I want to tell you about a place that stayed with me for years, a stretch of land people know as the Crimson Mile. I first came across it while digging through old local history, and from that moment, I couldn't let it go. The more I learned, the more it felt like this place was holding on to something heavy, something unsettled. Over time, I kept returning there, usually on my own. In the daylight, it can seem almost harmless at first, quiet, still. But even then, I've caught things that never sat right with me. More than once, I've seen a dark figure standing far off along the path, just still, watching. And every single time, the moment I blink or try to focus, it's gone. Other times, it seems to slip between the trees, as if it knows I can feel it there. The spot I'm talking about is where the old Minamura railway station once stood, near the original gates of Dunmore House. Long ago, that station was built for the wealthy Fuller family, who lived nearby, and it operated from the 1870s until the early 1940s. The footpath there now used to be the original road, and the railway line still runs close beside it. One day, while I was taking photos, I noticed something in the distance near a little bridge by the water. It looked like a black figure standing there. I'd seen that same shape before, but that was the first time I ever managed to catch it on camera. Not long after, I took another photo, and there it was again, this time deeper in the trees, almost like it was following me. Sometimes it looks like it's wrapped in a dark cloak. Sometimes it's just a shape, but it always feels aware. There's also an old bench seat near the path, and I have to be honest with you, that place gives me a dreadful feeling. Sitting there alone, especially as evening closes in, is like waiting for something you can't see to move closer. The sounds from the bush seem to change after dark. Every creak, every rustle starts to feel personal. What makes it worse is the history tied to that exact area. So many people lost their lives near the gates of Dunmore House and the old station. There were suicides, fatal accidents, gruesome discoveries, and sudden deaths stretching across decades. Even after the station was abandoned and moved farther south, and even after the gates were relocated to make way for the newer road, tragedies seemed to keep finding that same ground. One story that never left me was about a family driving home from a holiday along the south coast. Just past the bridge near the gates, their car struck the back of a truck carrying protruding logs. The mother was killed instantly in a horrifying way, right in front of her husband and children. And as if that wasn't cruel enough, more heartbreak followed that family in the years after. It's one of those stories that clings to the air when you stand there. Then there are the stranger accounts. People have long claimed they heard a baby crying in the middle of the night along that road. I used to dismiss that until I uncovered an older tragedy from 1916. A woman named Mrs. Lambert was riding home in a horse and buggy when it jolted violently near the gates. She was thrown clear, but the baby in her arms was flung onto the roadside and killed. After learning that, those stories didn't sound so easy to laugh off anymore. And it isn't only the dark figure. Some people, myself included, have sensed something else there, something shapeless, almost like a drifting black mass. Not always fully seen, more felt than anything. It leaves you drained, dizzy, strangely hollow, as though the place itself is pulling energy straight out of you. So when I walk that path now, camera in hand, I don't just feel like I'm exploring local history. I feel like I'm stepping into a place where the past never really settled. A place that still watches, still remembers. And honestly, once you know what happened there, you start to wonder what else is still waiting in the dark. You know, I still think about this sometimes. It all happened during the summer of 2022, when I'd completely flipped my sleep schedule. Since school was out, I was up all night and sleeping half the day like a full-time creature of darkness. Most nights I'd leave my room and hang out in the living room because my older brother was staying with us then, along with his girlfriend and their little boy, so the bedroom was crowded and I needed some air. At first, it was small stuff. Strange stuff, but small. We had these dark fluorescent grow lights for my mom's plants, and at night, those lights would start flickering. The kitchen light would do it too. Sometimes they'd dim, sometimes they'd cut off, sometimes they just refused to come back on right away. And sure, you can explain that away. Old house, old wiring, whatever. Then my nephew's toys started going off on their own. And I don't mean one toy making a little random sound once. I mean toys making noise when nobody was touching them, sometimes when they weren't even switched on. Still, even then, I tried to stay reasonable. I told myself there had to be some normal explanation. Batteries, faulty wiring, coincidence. All of that mostly happened at night too, usually somewhere between 8 p.m. and 5 in the morning. But then came the moment that really settled it in my mind. It was early June, around 3:56 in the morning. I got up to use the bathroom while everybody else was asleep. My mom, my little sister, my older brother, his girlfriend, and my nephew. Now, there are two things that matter here. First, the floors in that old house were ridiculously creaky. I mean, if anybody so much as shifted their weight in the hallway, you'd hear it. Second, the bathroom was right down the same hallway as the bedrooms, so if someone had stepped out of a room, I would have heard the door open. So I'm in the bathroom, finishing up, washing my hands, and then I hear it. The floorboards. Creaking. Slow, steady footsteps in the hallway outside the bathroom. At first, I froze and just listened. It sounded like someone pacing back and forth, up and down the hall, like they were waiting for me to come out. And that was what made it so wrong. If it had been anybody in my family, I would have heard their bedroom door. And honestly, somebody would have already knocked, tried the handle, or called out. We were not exactly a respect privacy at all costs type of household. But this thing didn't do any of that. It just kept pacing. Back and forth. Back and forth. I stood there staring at the door, listening, trying to make sense of it. Then finally, I reached for the doorknob. And the second my hand touched it, the pacing stopped. Not slowed down, not faded. Stopped. I waited another minute in total silence, heart pounding, trying to decide whether I was about to open the door to a person or to something I couldn't explain. Eventually, I opened it. Nobody. The hallway was empty. The living room was empty. I looked into the bedrooms, and everyone was still asleep. I checked the kitchen too, turned lights on, looked around, and there was absolutely no one there. And this is where I made a mistake. Trying to act tough, or maybe just trying not to admit I was scared, I said out loud, kind of joking, that whatever it was needed to leave and that it didn't belong there. Real brave, right? So I turned the lights back off and started heading toward the hallway. The second I switched off that hallway light, I heard the floorboards explode with sound, like something took off running straight at me. After that, things went back to being quieter, but not normal. Mostly the lights kept acting up, even after we tried fixing them. And one night, around 4 a.m., I was sitting in the living room when every light suddenly went out at once. The whole room went cold, just instantly cold, and I felt something breathe right into my face. I can still remember that part in a way that makes my skin crawl. Nothing else happened in that house that was as intense as that, at least not to me. But those weren't my only experiences. Truthfully, a lot of my family has had moments we can't explain. This was just one cluster of encounters from 2022 that stuck with me more than most. And I'll be honest with you, those experiences changed how I look at the world. I'm not especially religious, and I still think skepticism matters. I think you should question things. You should look for the logical answer first. But after nights like that, I just can't completely dismiss things people call impossible. To me, it feels less like that can't exist, and more like maybe most of us are just lucky enough not to cross paths with it. Anyway, that's the story. And if you've ever had something happen that you still can't explain, trust me, I'd believe you enough to listen. I'd say I'm about 3/4 a believer and 1/4 skeptic. There have been a handful of things in my life that pulled me toward believing, even though, if I'm being honest, every one of them could probably be explained away somehow. The first thing happened maybe 20 or so years ago. There was this one particular streetlight I used to pass under at night, and almost every time I drove beneath it, it would shut off. It didn't matter whether it was early evening or late at night. If I went under it, the light would go out. It happened so many times over the years that I stopped thinking of it as coincidence. I never had a real explanation for it, and then eventually, just like that, it stopped happening. The second thing reaches further back, to World War II. My uncle served in the Navy aboard a destroyer in the Pacific. His ship was hit by a Japanese submarine, and he was killed. I was born a few months later and named after him, which always made that story feel personal to me. Then years later, in 1969, I was a young naval officer attending my cousin's wedding in Annapolis. While I was walking around the grounds, I came across this small stone building. I hadn't been searching for anything in particular, and I didn't even know what it was. When I stepped inside, I learned it housed the crypt of John Paul Jones. In the center of the room was a glass display case holding a massive book. Inside were the names of Navy ships with their crew members listed on separate pages. Each day, they'd open the case, turn a page, and honor a different ship and crew for the next 24 hours. Since there were so many pages, it took years before the cycle started over again. And on the exact day I happened to wander in there, the ship being honored was my uncle's ship. His name was right there on the page. Was that a sign? I honestly don't know, but it stayed with me. The third thing happened after my mother died in 2000. About 3 months later, I was sitting on the front steps of my house when 2 snowy owls appeared in my yard. One landed on a tree branch, and the other settled on the ground maybe 30 feet away. They both just looked at me, calmly, for several minutes before flying off. Now, snowy owls are not something you normally see where I live. They tend to stay closer to the coast or marshland, and I live several miles inland in a wooded area. I'd been living in that house for decades, and that was the only time I ever saw snowy owls there, or anywhere nearby for that matter. What made it feel even stranger was that my mother had been an identical twin, and my aunt had died many years before she did. So of course the thought crossed my mind. Was that the two of them, stopping by together? I can't prove that, and I know how that sounds, but it's hard not to wonder. The fourth thing happened after my son-in-law died from cancer. A few months later, I was at my daughter's house helping her clean up. I was down in the garage, which sits under the house, and I had gone in through one of those lightweight hollow doors. I remember clearly closing it behind me. A few minutes later, that door flew open and slammed hard against the wall with a bang that made me jump. No one else was in the house, and there wasn't any wind that could have done it. That one really got to me. So that's where I am. I want to believe, but I'm still cautious. I still question everything. At the same time, when enough moments pile up in a life, you start to feel like maybe they're not all random. Maybe they don't prove anything outright, but together they make it harder to dismiss it all. So I remain skeptical, but I'm leaning a little more toward belief than I used to be. You know, I grew up hearing this story from my grandmother when I was little, back in a quiet town in Colombia. She never told it like it was some dramatic legend, and she definitely did not use it to frighten us into behaving. The way she talked about it was calm, almost casual, like she was describing the weather or an old neighbor, like it was simply one of those things that could happen if you lived there long enough. There was a narrow river just beyond our neighborhood. During the day, it felt ordinary. People went there to rinse clothes, sit on the rocks, gossip a little, cool off when the heat got heavy. But once night came, hardly anyone went near it. I remember being about 14 when I finally asked her why. She looked at me for a second, very still, and then she said, "Because sometimes you can hear her." She meant La Llorona. Of course, I already knew the name. Most kids in Colombia do. But to me, it was just one of those stories adults pass around. Something meant to keep children from wandering too far after dark. I thought that was all it was. But my grandmother told it differently. She said it was not like the versions people put in films or online. She said sometimes you do not see anything at all. Sometimes you only hear her. She told me that when she was younger, maybe 16 or 17, she and her cousin had been walking home after spending the evening at a friend's house. It was late, and the road near the river was dim because the streetlights never really reached that stretch. At first, everything felt normal. Quiet, but normal. Then they heard someone crying. Not loud, not sharp, just this low, distant sound, like someone sobbing somewhere in the dark. Her cousin stopped first and asked, "Do you hear that too?" My grandmother said they both stood there listening, not moving, trying to place where it was coming from. It seemed to drift from the riverbank. And then she told me the part that always stayed with me. She said it did not sound like ordinary crying. It sounded stretched out somehow, hollow and thin, as if the night itself were carrying it farther than it should. Her cousin whispered, "Let's leave." But before they could take another step, they heard something else. A voice, faint, broken, like someone calling out for her children. My grandmother said that was the moment they ran. They did not look behind them. They did not slow down. They just ran until they were back where the houses were close together and the dark did not feel so wide. When they got home, they told her father what they had heard. She said he did not even look shocked. He just asked them one thing. Did it sound close or far away? They told him it sounded far, and he nodded. Then he said something my grandmother never forgot, and honestly, neither have I. If it sounds far away, you're safe. Years later, I asked her what he meant by that. She told me people in town believed something strange about La Llorona. If you hear her and she sounds distant, then she really is far away. But if the crying sounds very close to you, then she isn't. For a long time, I treated that story like an old belief, the kind families keep alive because it becomes part of the place. I listened, I remembered it, but I never fully believed it. Then a few years ago, I went back to visit my grandmother. One night, I was standing outside the house close to midnight. The river is still there, maybe 10 minutes away on foot. Everything was still. No voices, no wind, just that heavy quiet small towns get after dark. And then I heard it. Crying. Soft. Faint. It sounded far away. So I went inside and told my grandmother, almost expecting her to smile and brush it off. But she didn't. She looked at me very seriously and asked me the exact same question her father had asked her all those years before. Did it sound close or far away? want to tell you something that changed me completely. For most of my life, I didn't believe in anything paranormal. I used to call myself an atheist, and I brushed off stories about ghosts, spirits, or strange encounters as fear, superstition, or people letting their imagination run wild. That was who I was. Until one night when I was 16. I was asleep in my room, alone, like any normal night. I had drifted off lying partly on my side, with my body turned awkwardly toward the ceiling. Then I suddenly woke up. The moment my eyes opened, I saw someone standing in my room. He was near the foot of my bed, off to my right side, just standing there and staring directly at me. My room was this figure that's the part I can never explain. It was like his shape swallowed up what little light was there. I could clearly make out a tall silhouette, and what stood out most was that he was wearing a hat. I know how ridiculous that sounds when you say it out loud. People hear that part and either laugh or stop taking you seriously. But that's exactly what I saw. He was very tall, somewhere around 6.5 feet, maybe even taller. And his eyes. I remember his eyes most of all. They weren't red. They were this cold, unnatural blue, fixed right on me. I tried to move. I tried to yell. Nothing happened. I was completely paralyzed. My body wouldn't respond, and my head was stuck facing his direction, like I was forced to keep looking at him. I can't even put into words how intense the panic was. Inside, I was spiraling. I was in a way I had never experienced before. But at the same time, something else rose up in me too. Anger. I remember thinking, almost screaming in my own mind, trying to fight back, cursing at him in my head, wanting to attack him, wanting him gone. But he never moved. He just stood there, watching me, like he knew exactly how afraid I was. After what felt like forever, I shut my eyes because I couldn't stand looking at him anymore. I was that scared. And that was the moment I started praying to Jesus. I hadn't been someone who prayed much before that, but in that moment it came out of me naturally, like it was the only thing I had left. Then everything went blank. The next thing I remember, I woke up again. This time I could move. I could speak. It felt like I had blacked out or passed out from fear after closing my eyes. I sat there crying, to my core. I had never seen anything like that before, never felt that kind of helplessness. Afterward, I tried to be rational about it. I told myself it had to be a nightmare. That's what any reasonable person would do, right? I kept trying to explain it away, but deep down, I knew what bothered me most. I didn't feel like I had been dreaming. I felt awake, fully awake. I remember my eyes being open. I remember the room. I remember him. That experience stayed with me. It haunted me for a long time. I felt like I was losing my mind trying to make sense of it. Eventually, I searched online just to see if anyone had ever described something similar. And that's when things got even stranger. I found story after story from people describing the same figure. A tall, dark man wearing a hat, standing and watching them, often during moments of paralysis. Some people even had a name for him, the Hat Man. Reading that shook me. Part of me felt relieved that I wasn't alone, that I hadn't just invented something out of nowhere. But another part of me was deeply unsettled, because it seemed to confirm that what I saw wasn't just some private nightmare. Other people had seen him too. I've never seen him again since that night, and I hope I never do. But ever since then, I pray before I go to sleep. Every night. Not out of habit, but because that experience left something in me that never fully went away. I'm 25 now, and I'm only recently starting to tell this story honestly. For years I kept it to myself because I knew how it would sound. I knew people would doubt it, laugh at it, or dismiss it. But I know what I experienced, and I know how deeply it affected me. So I'm sharing it with you now because maybe you've seen something similar. Maybe you've had an experience you couldn't explain, and you've kept it quiet for the same reasons I did. And if you have, I'd really want to hear your story too. Let me tell you about something that happened when I was a kid, back in 2003, right after my family moved into this house, in a quiet suburban neighborhood where every place looked almost identical. The house itself wasn't especially old, maybe 15 or 20 years at most, nothing with some grand haunted history attached to it. And honestly, at the time, it just felt like another house. We only lived there for less than a year before my parents separated and we moved again. What I remember most from those first months is that we had this little family routine. We'd all sit down together and watch American Idol. That probably sounds small, but for us, doing anything all together like that was actually kind of rare, so I really looked forward to it. My dad was rooting hard for Clay. My mom was completely on Ruben's side, and my younger sister Maya and I didn't really care who won. We were mostly just happy to be there, sharing the moment. Most evenings had the same rhythm. We'd get home from school or sports or wherever we'd been, eat dinner, and then my sister and I would race each other upstairs to shower before the show started. The hot water in that house disappeared ridiculously fast, so going second was basically a punishment. There was also this bathroom off my parents' bedroom, but it never really got used, and their whole room always felt strangely off limits to me. Not scary exactly, just unsettling in that way certain parts of a house can be when you're a kid. One night after dinner, instead of going our separate ways, we were all hanging out in the living room. I was perched on the end of the couch near the front hall, where I could see straight into the kitchen, the staircase, and the front door. My sister was in the kitchen getting herself a drink when my mom said, "All right, if you two want to watch Idol, go shower and get your pajamas on now before it starts." The second my mom said that, I heard Maya set her cup down and bolt for the stairs. I jumped up right after her because there was no way I was willingly signing up for a freezing shower. She had a good head start, maybe 10 feet, and I can still picture her running ahead of me in this oversized pink sleep shirt, laughing as she went. You know that kind of half laugh, half scream little sisters do when they know they're being chased? That's exactly what it was. She scrambled up the stairs on all fours like kids do, and I reached out and grabbed at her ankle, just playing around, trying to slow her down enough to beat her to the bathroom. I felt her leg. I remember that part so clearly. She slipped away and kept going. By the time we got to the top of the stairs, I already knew she was probably going to win, but I still chased her down the hallway because of course I did. I was 11. There was no universe where I was going to just give up politely. She got to the bathroom first. I swung myself around the banister and made one last desperate lunge toward the door just as she ran in. And right away, something felt wrong. She didn't turn the light on. She didn't slam the door shut either, which is exactly what she would have done if she'd beaten me there. So I stopped for a second and thought maybe she was hiding just inside, waiting to scare me. I got quiet, trying to turn it around on her, and then I jumped into the dark bathroom and shouted, "Boo!" But she wasn't there. I turned back, convinced I had to be missing something. And then, while I was standing there trying to make sense of it, my mom called upstairs asking whether I was going to shower or not, because Maya didn't want to miss the beginning of the episode. I stepped down a couple of stairs until I could see the living room. And there she was, sitting on the floor in front of the TV like she'd been there the whole time. I didn't say anything. I just took my shower and went on with the night like nothing had happened. Even then, I think some part of me just refused to deal with it. But I've never forgotten it. What sticks with me most isn't just the image of her running ahead of me. It's the physical feeling of it, grabbing her ankle, hearing her laugh. The whole thing felt completely real, solid, ordinary, until suddenly it wasn't. Now, years later, I still go back and forth about it. Maybe it was some incredibly vivid childhood dream that got tangled up with real memories. Maybe it was a hallucination. Maybe my brain stitched together pieces of different nights and turned them into one story. Honestly, that's probably the most reasonable explanation. But even now, with all my skepticism, it still feels real to me in a way that's hard to explain. The strange part is, I don't remember being scared. Not then. Just confused. Deeply, weirdly disoriented. Like reality had skipped for half a second, and I was the only one who noticed. Looking back on it now, that memory still sends a chill up the back of my neck. And I still can't fully explain why. Let me tell you about something that still unsettles me when I think about it. In late 2024, two of my closest friends were getting married, and because I was in the wedding party, I helped plan a shared bachelorette trip for them. We decided to spend the weekend near a Connecticut aquarium that meant a lot to them, since it was close to where they'd gotten engaged. There were 7 of us altogether, me and my partner, the 2 brides, their 2 maids of honor, and 1 more close friend. Because everyone was driving in from different places, I rented this beautiful old house near the water. It had a wide porch, a couple of big bathrooms, and that cozy mix of historic charm with modern updates. I'm not going to share where it was, just out of respect for the owner. The first day was honestly perfect. We took pictures outside by the river, wandered through shops, had dinner at this wonderful little Italian place, and ended the night back at the house playing party games and laughing ourselves silly. Everybody eventually drifted off to bed. The brides took 1 room upstairs. The maids of honor shared the room across from them. My partner and I stayed in the downstairs bedroom, and our other friend slept on a futon in the enclosed porch. The strange part started the next morning. I'd slept deeply, which almost never happens for me. I'm usually the kind of person who wakes up at every little sound, even in my own home. The brides seemed totally normal too, but the other 4 people in our group looked off. Quiet, drained, uneasy. At first I thought maybe it was just from the night before, except that didn't really fit. One of them hadn't been drinking at all, and my partner never overdoes it. Something else was clearly wrong. Nobody wanted to say it out loud. Not at first. The brides went upstairs after breakfast, and once they were out of earshot, I pulled the others together and said, basically, "Please, just tell me what happened." I knew they didn't want to ruin the trip, but we needed to be honest with each other. One of the maids of honor finally spoke up. She said she'd fallen asleep easily enough, but all night she'd had these awful dreams. In one of them, she was sitting at the kitchen island, and from there, she could see the doorway to the pantry. She said there were children there, peeking around the frame and watching her. One of them was an older boy, maybe around 10, pale, with dark hair cut short around his face. The others were younger, around 6 or 7, a boy and a girl. What terrified her most was their eyes. Not dark eyes. Completely black eyes. She said they never threatened her, never came toward her, never said a word, but she knew in the dream that they weren't living children. She felt certain they were dead, and that they had been dead for a very long time. Then the other maid of honor said she dreamed about children too. She hadn't seen them clearly, but she heard them. In her dream, their voices were coming through the heating vent along the kitchen wall near the pantry. She couldn't make out exact words, just the sound of multiple children trying to reach her. That frightened her enough on its own. Then our friend from the porch admitted they dreamed about children too, only theirs were outside in the backyard behind the house. They said it was more like sensing them than really interacting with them. like the children were there but keeping their distance. And then there was my partner. He was reluctant to talk, which immediately made me nervous, because he's usually very open with me. He finally admitted he'd had dreams about the same children too, but I could tell he was holding something back. Later, when we were alone in our room, he told me the rest. Hearing that absolutely broke my heart. By then, all of us had agreed not to tell the brides. It was their weekend, and we didn't want to put fear or sadness into something that was supposed to be joyful. We only had one more stretch of time in the house before leaving for the day anyway, and nobody was going back to sleep there. Before we left, my partner hung back for a moment inside the house alone. Later, he told me he'd spoken quietly toward the pantry, just in case anything was really there. He told the children they didn't have to stay, that whoever had hurt them couldn't control them anymore, that they could leave. We never experienced anything else after that. We left later that afternoon and didn't spend another night there. Since then, I've looked into old cases in that part of Connecticut. I've found stories about missing children, murdered children, tragedies that make your stomach drop. But I've never found anything that matches exactly what everyone described. Not 3 children together, not connected clearly to that house, not anything solid enough to explain what happened. And honestly, that leaves me with the part that scares me most. Maybe those children were real, and somehow 4 people brushed up against the same piece of pain in that house. But if they weren't real, if no such crime ever happened there, then what was it that reached into all those dreams and told the same story in almost the same way? What could create something that consistent, that vivid, across that many people at once? That's the question I still can't shake. I want to tell you about something that happened when I was really little, around 4 years old. I'm in my 30s now, and I still remember that night with this strange, sharp clarity, like it never really left me. There were a lot of unsettling things that happened in that house, but this was the moment that cracked everything open. Before I get into it, you need a little background. My family had deep roots in a tiny town in southeast Kansas. We're talking generations. My mom grew up there, moved away as a teenager with her mother, and then her whole life got ripped apart in a terrible car accident. She was the only one who survived. After weeks in a coma, she woke up to lawsuits, grief, and eventually a settlement. Not long after that, her father brought her back to that same small Kansas town. She was still so young. She went back to high school, met my dad, got pregnant with me, and by 17 she was married and trying to build a life. My parents bounced between rentals for a while, always ending up in cramped, run-down places. So when my mom had the chance to buy a home, she took it. That's how we ended up in that house. It was a huge, old 2-story place across from the high school. The kind of house people always had stories about, even if they'd never set foot inside. Built way back in the 1800s, full of age and history and that kind of silence old houses seem to carry in their walls. My mom thought it was beautiful the first time she saw it, and honestly, I understand why. It had this worn, grand feeling to it. Not long after we moved in, my parents split up. My dad left, and for most of the next several years, it was just my mom and me in that house. The layout matters, so stay with me for a second. When you came through the front door, there was this big staircase right in the center. To the left was a small sitting room. To the right, a larger living space with a wide opening where double doors had probably once been. Under the stairs was the bathroom, and toward the back of the house was the kitchen and laundry area, which felt like it had once been a porch that somebody enclosed. Upstairs was stranger. The stairs came up near the back of the house. To the right at the top was my room. To the left was a long hallway. My mom's room sat off the middle of that hall, and at the very end was this room we called the balcony room. Now, the first big thing happened on a chilly autumn night in 1995. My mom and I had been at her friend Jay's place most of the evening. Everybody called him Jaybird. I remember music playing, people laughing, that whole messy young adult energy that surrounded my mom back then. She was only in her early 20s, still trying to outrun a lot of pain, and I got dragged along for all of it. Still, as a little kid, I liked being around grown-ups who were in good moods. They were kind to me. It felt lively. It felt safe enough. Anyway, sometime around 2 in the morning, maybe later, we headed home. We pulled into the driveway by the garage, which sat a little ways behind the house. From there, you could see the upstairs windows glowing through thin curtains. Our bedroom lights were on, just like we'd left them. Nothing looked wrong. Nothing felt off. We walked in through the back door into the laundry room, then into the kitchen. The light from the front living room was spilling faintly through the house. And then we heard it. Footsteps. Heavy ones. Thud, 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 thud. Not outside, not next door. Inside the house. My mom froze. I froze. We moved toward the living room and listened harder. She called out, "Hello?" Nothing. Just footsteps. My mom called again, louder this time. "Who's up there?" No answer. The footsteps got harder, heavier. They weren't just steps anymore. They were stomps. In an old house, you don't just hear something like that. You feel it. The floor itself carried it down into your legs. Then my mom shouted one last time, and suddenly the stomping stopped. Just stopped. For half a breath, everything was still. Then whatever was upstairs started coming toward us. I felt it move down the hallway, then onto the staircase. Fast. Stomp, stomp, stomp. Closer and closer, pounding down those stairs like someone was about to burst into view. My mom and I were just rooted there, staring into the darkness, waiting for somebody, anybody, to appear. The stomping came all the way down to the bottom step, and there was nothing there. Nothing. I still remember the shape of that emptiness, that awful empty space where someone should have been. Then the stomping turned and ran back up the stairs, around the landing, and down the hall again. That snapped my mom out of it. She grabbed me, ran out the back door, and carried me to the car so fast I could barely breathe. We drove straight back to Jaybird's place. When my mom told him what happened, he didn't believe her. He thought someone was messing with us. But she begged him to come back and see for himself, so he did. This time we parked in front and went through the front door. The second we stepped inside and reached the foot of the stairs, we heard it again. The same stomping. Jaybird tried to explain it away. Said somebody must have climbed in through a window, that maybe there was a ladder outside. So we all went around the house checking. There was no ladder, no broken window, no sign anyone had gotten in. We went back inside, and once again the stomping came down the stairs, all the way to the bottom, stopping right in front of us where nothing stood. That was enough for him. He ushered us out and told us we were staying at his place for the night. The next morning we came back in daylight. Sunlight filled the upstairs hallway, and everything looked completely normal. Nothing had been moved, no signs of a break-in, no explanation waiting for us in the morning. After that, Jaybird didn't come around much. My mom and I talked about that night for a little while, but not for long. After a while, she started brushing it off, pretending it was a joke or that we must have misunderstood what happened. I think she was scared in a way she didn't know how to talk about, and instead of facing it, she buried it. Years later, long after we left that house, she finally admitted to me that she believed it had been haunted all along. But at the time, she denied everything. That became its own kind of wound. As I got older, the story followed me. I was already the odd kid at school. Quiet, awkward, more interested in music and weird little hobbies than sports or fitting in. And one day, when some kid asked if they could sleep over at my house, I answered without thinking. Sure, but my house is haunted. You can imagine how that went. By the end of the day, everybody knew. By the next day, adults knew. Suddenly, people weren't just whispering that I was weird, they were wondering what was wrong with me. Or worse, what kind of things my mother had exposed me to. The truth is, at that age, I wasn't even traumatized by the haunting part. I was fascinated. The staircase incident had been so intense, but after that, the house mostly settled into smaller things. A door shutting when no one was near it. Floor creaks in the middle of the night. A few piano notes sounding from another room. Little things. Enough to make you pause, but not enough to prove anything. And every time I tried to talk about it, my mom would shut me down. My mom had a revolving cast of friends back then. Sometimes she rented out rooms to them, just to get by, since she didn't have a mortgage hanging over her head. Life in that house was loose, chaotic, unpredictable. No bedtimes, late nights, adults everywhere. Sometimes they'd turn off all the lights and play hide and seek with me through the house after midnight, which sounds fun until you remember the house we were in. Other nights, I'd sit out near the balcony room and beg them to tell me ghost stories. And every so often, I'd overhear one of them talking quietly about something strange that had happened to them there. That always stuck with me, because I wanted to understand it. I wanted it to make sense. The house seemed to get worse whenever my mom's relationships got worse. That was the pattern I noticed, even as a kid. There was one boyfriend, Dean, who was decent enough. I didn't love him, but he was kinder than most of the men she brought home. They were together about a year, and when things started falling apart between them, the house changed. The random noises got more frequent. The cats started staring into empty doorways, especially upstairs. The balcony room felt wrong in a way that's hard to explain unless you felt a room go sour for no reason. And then I started having experiences of my own. One evening, near the end of their relationship, my mom and Dean left me home alone for a while. I was fine with it because I had a Nintendo 64, and that was enough to keep my whole little universe occupied. I was sitting on the floor in the big living room, completely absorbed in a game, when I heard my mom's voice behind me say, "Oh, hey." Casual, friendly, like she'd just spotted someone walking in. I barely reacted at first because people came and went all the time. Then my stomach dropped. The back door hadn't opened, and my mom wasn't home. I turned off the game, turned off the TV, sat there in silence, staring at the dark screen, hoping maybe I'd catch a reflection behind me or hear another sound that would prove I hadn't imagined it. When I finally stood up and turned around, the whole house felt wrong. I could see the smaller living room, the stairs, the bathroom doorway, the kitchen. And I had this overwhelming feeling that something was standing in every open doorway, watching me. I couldn't see anyone, but I felt watched from all sides. I bolted out the front door and ran across the street towards some kids playing ball nearby. I begged one older boy to come back with me because I was convinced someone was inside the house. He did. We went room to room. The doors were open. Hot summer air was blowing through the house. Everything looked normal, but that feeling was still there. We were not alone. At least that's what it felt like to me. Halfway through searching upstairs, my mom and Dean came back. I told them what happened, and instead of comforting me, my mom got angry. She thanked the boy, sent him away, and scolded me for bringing a stranger into the house. A couple of days later, something happened that finally scared me for real. I'd moved my game console into my mom's room because it felt smaller, safer, easier to keep an eye on. I was sitting there playing while my mom and Dean were gone again, trying to relax. I had snacks, cold air blowing from the window unit, the TV humming in front of me. At one point, I got up, ran to the bathroom, then came back and sat down again, this time with my back to the open bedroom door. A little while later, I felt a finger touch my back. Not a brush, not fabric shifting, a finger. It touched just below my shoulder blade and caught my shirt slightly as it slid away. I knew exactly what I felt. I ran. When I came back from a weekend away, the whole house felt different, heavier, darker somehow, even in daylight. The air itself felt thick. That night, I slept in my mom's bed. Moonlight was pouring through the room, bright enough that I could make out nearly everything. My mom was already asleep beside me, and I was lying there facing the open bedroom door. Then I heard the first stair creak. That sound was unmistakable. Somebody was coming up the stairs. Because of the angle from the bed, I could see into part of the hallway and over toward the staircase. At first I felt relieved, because the figure coming up looked like a man. Tall, thin. For one hopeful second, I thought Dean had come back. But as it reached the top of the stairs, I realized that wasn't a man. It was the shape of one, a dark silhouette. No face, no features. Just a person-shaped shadow moving with purpose. It walked down the hallway and turned into my mom's room. I watched it come to the bed. It stood beside my mother for a moment, then lifted the blanket, climbed into bed next to her, and vanished. Just like that. Gone. The covers settled back down as if someone had just lain there and then dissolved into the dark. I did not sleep the rest of that night. I lay there, frozen, staring into the room until sunrise. And the next morning, when I told my mom, she denied it again. That house never really got better after that. My mom moved on to someone new, and the uglier life got inside those walls, the uglier the atmosphere in the house became. It felt like the place fed on tension, on cruelty, on fear. Things got worse between my mom and the man she was with, and the activity got worse too. By then I understood something I hadn't been able to put into words before. It wasn't just that the house was haunted. It was that the house seemed to wake up when our lives were falling apart. And once it woke up, it never really let us forget it was there. Welcome to the Paranormal M channel. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Thanks so much for listening and for supporting the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you'll be one of the first to catch our latest videos. And by the way, thank you for sending in so many of your paranormal experiences. Now, without further ado, let's get started. Good night. Okay, so before I get into the spooky part, you need a little background, because this cat is genuinely the pride of my life. I've had my girl for about 5 years now. She's around 9, and I swear she runs this house like she pays the mortgage. Her name is Bellatrix, and yes, we originally meant to adopt just one cat, but you know how that goes. We met 2, fell in love with both, and suddenly we were a 2-cat household. When we adopted Bellatrix, the shelter gave us a little history. She has some allergies, and she's had seizures in the past. Nothing constant, nothing we can't handle. Honestly, she's pretty easy to care for. But here's the part that made my heart hurt. She'd been returned multiple times before we got her, always within a few weeks. We've always assumed people got scared off by the seizures and didn't want the responsibility. Anyway, the paranormal speculation. The very first day we brought her home, she did what curious cats do. Immediately started touring the place like she was inspecting it. And I kind of followed her around because I was obsessed with her from the second she stepped out of the carrier. So the house layout matters here. We've got 2 floors and then a basement that we don't really use for hanging out, but it's where we keep their food and litter boxes. Upstairs is basically one big open space. Kitchen, dining room, living room, and off the dining room there's this huge sliding glass door that opens to the back porch. Then there's a long hallway with rooms branching off. Bathroom, my bedroom, my mom's bedroom, my mom's office, and then this spare room at the end. And that spare room has always been weird. It used to be my room when I was little, like toddler to around 10. And I'm not exaggerating when I say I had brutal night terrors in there. Not just bad dreams. I mean waking up panicked, sweaty, heart racing, the whole thing. For years. Then I eventually switched rooms, and it was like someone flipped a switch. Nightmares stopped almost immediately. So Bellatrix is doing her little house tour, and she pads right up to that spare room. She steps inside, just barely, and I'm expecting her to sniff around like normal. Instead, she freezes. Then she starts hissing. Not the cranky cat, leave me alone hiss. This sounded like pure warning, like she was looking at something I couldn't see. She didn't stop until I backed up and shut the door. I remember just standing there going, okay? And here's the thing. 5 years later, she still won't go in that room. Not once. The door can be wide open, sunbeams on the floor, the other cat strolling in like it's nothing. Bellatrix won't even put a paw across the threshold. My dog has curled up in there. The other cat naps in there sometimes. But Bellatrix? Nope. Hard no. Then she developed this routine that started about a month after we got her, and it still freaks me out a little. Every single night, she goes to the sliding glass door and just stares out into the darkness. Like a little statue. Not pacing, not crying, not scratching, just staring. For close to an hour. Every night. Same time, same spot. At first we were like, oh, she wants outside. Because she loves sunbeams and windows and being cozy. So we actually tried the responsible cat parent thing. Got her used to a harness, took her out to the porch. She acted like we were trying to escort her into a war zone. She hated it, completely. Wanted back inside immediately. So that theory died. And I know that sounds cute, and it is. But the vibe is also very much, I have completed my nightly security sweep. We may now rest. Now, here's the part that made my family start calling her a portal jumper. I cannot tell you how many times I'll see her in one room, clear as day, like she's sprawled out on her little bed in the living room. I'll walk down the hall to my room, and 2 seconds later, she's already on my bed, staring at me. Calm, like she's been there the whole time. And I'm not talking maybe she ran past you stuff. There are times where it genuinely feels impossible, like the timing doesn't make sense, like she'd have to teleport, or sprint like an Olympic athlete, or crawl through the walls. It happens so often that it's become normal in the house for someone to go, I literally just saw her, and someone else responds, well, she's in here now, so... And there was one time, this still annoys me, we realized she was outside. Just outside. We had no idea how she got out. No doors open, no obvious escape route. She wasn't scared or hiding either. She was just out there like, oh hey, I'm doing my own thing. So recently my mom and I were talking about all of this, kind of laughing, kind of not. And I told her, I genuinely think she's paranormal. Like, I think she has a weird connection to something. And my mom, who is usually pretty logical, was like, honestly? Yeah, I've wondered that too. We're not the type to blame everything on ghosts. We try to be reasonable. But when you stack it all together, the spare room she won't enter, the nightly staring into the dark, the patrol routine, the impossible appearances, it starts to feel like more than just cats are weird. And yeah, I know cats have this reputation for being spiritual little creatures, like they can sense things we can't. But Bellatrix? Sometimes I look at her and I'm like, are you seeing something? Or are you going somewhere? So that's my story. Tell me what you think, because at this point, I'm open to any explanation, including the possibility that she's Batman. So, let me tell you about this trip my husband and I took. We stayed at this hotel in early May of 2022, and we were there for about a week. We checked in around the 6th and somehow got upgraded to a suite in the Nomad part of the building, which felt very fancy, especially because the bedroom had this gorgeous roll-top bathtub right there in the open, like it was meant to be a feature. And honestly, at first, it was a feature. It was bright, clean, kind of dreamy. The tub had this big, round chrome stopper at the bottom. You know the kind you press down to seal, press again to pop up. But what I remember most is how reflective it was, like a tiny mirror sitting at the very center of the tub. One afternoon, my husband, Eli, went downstairs to grab something, and I was alone in the suite. It was quiet, calm, and I thought, okay, perfect. I'm taking a bath. The lights were fully on, too. This wasn't some spooky candlelit situation, just normal, bright lighting. So I'm in the bath, relaxing, and when I'm done, I lean forward and press the chrome stopper to drain the water. As the water starts to sink lower and lower, my eyes drift down toward that shiny little circle, because it's right there, and I can see my own reflection in it. But then, I see something else. In that little warped mirror, right behind my shoulder, there's this dark shape, like a black silhouette. Not sharp like a person's face or features, more like a heavy mass of shadow. Tallish, close, like it's standing right behind me. And I remember just freezing, like my whole body went still. I stared at it in the reflection, trying to make my brain turn it into something normal. A towel, a coat, anything. Then I turn around. Nothing. Just this plain, light-colored wall. No doorway, no corner, no furniture tall enough to throw a shadow like that. No movement. No, it's just explanation waiting for me. So I look back down at the chrome stopper, and the shadow is still there. That's when I really panicked. Because now it wasn't just a trick of the eye, it felt like it was choosing to stay in that reflection. I start scanning for any logical source. Next to the tub, there's a small round table with a shopping bag on it. This bright teal color, like that iconic jewelry store shade. And for a second I think, okay, maybe that's it. Maybe it's reflecting weird. But the table's too low. The bag's too low. They don't even show up in the stopper's reflection at all. I look up again. Nothing. Look down again. Gone. And I'm telling you, I moved so fast getting out of that bath I almost slipped on the tile. I dried off in a blur, barely even thinking, and I basically launched myself into bed just to wait for Eli to come back, because I suddenly could not stand the idea of being alone in that suite anymore. And here's the thing, that wasn't the only weird part. All through the stay, especially when the light was dimmer, I kept getting this feeling, like I was seeing movement out of the corner of my eye, like shapes passing through the suite. Not one time either. Enough times that I started avoiding looking directly into certain areas because I didn't want to confirm what my brain was suggesting. But I didn't say anything, because how do you say that out loud without sounding ridiculous? A day or so later, I finally told Eli what happened in the bath. I tried to tell it like a joke, like, "You'll never believe this weird thing my eyes did." But my voice wasn't joking. And he just went quiet. Then he said, really carefully, that he hadn't mentioned anything either, because he didn't want to scare me. Not one person, more than one. Just walking through the space like they belonged there, like it was normal, like they weren't lost or sneaking or trying to be frightening at all, just present, occupying it. And he watched it happen, quietly, and didn't wake me up because he didn't want to ruin the trip or panic me. So yeah, that's the part that really gets me, because we both had our own experiences in that same suite, and neither of us told the other until after. And once we did, it wasn't just a creepy moment anymore. It felt like we'd been sharing the room the whole time, and we just hadn't realized it. So, I've been holding on to these two moments for a long time, and even now, talking about them makes my stomach tighten a little. This all happened not long before my grandma passed away. In the months leading up to it, our house started doing this thing where it would sound alive in the wrong way. Strange little noises, random, out of place, like the house was trying to get our attention when nobody was looking. But there are two incidents that still sit heavy in my chest because I was there for both, close enough to feel the air shift, you know? The first one was back in 2021, when I was studying in my room in the early evening. It was one of those quiet nights where the whole house is lit up, but everything feels still. Just normal sounds. Me flipping pages, my mom moving around in the kitchen, and my grandma resting in the living area right next to my room. Our layout matters here. My room and the living space share this open ceiling gap. There's a divider, sure, but sound travels clearly. If someone sighs out there, I hear it. If a spoon hits the sink, I hear it. Nothing muffled, nothing hidden. That night I was deep into exam prep, half stressed, half zoned out, when I heard this slow scraping sound. Not a quick bump, not a normal shuffle. A chair being pushed, slowly, steadily, like someone was dragging it across the floor on purpose. I didn't even look up at first. My grandma, Marlene, she wasn't well at that point. She had good days, and then she had these days where she'd do odd things. Wander toward doors like she was going somewhere. Lose her balance. Move objects around without remembering. It was heartbreaking, honestly. So my brain did what brains do. It tried to make it make sense. I just thought, Grandma's moving a chair again. But at the same time, my mom heard it too. I remember the exact timing because it's one of those memories that plays back like a scene in a movie. My mom leaned out from the kitchen, just enough to see into the living space, and she froze. Later, she told me she could only see part of Grandma, just her upper body, and she could see the chair. There was a dining table blocking some of her view, so at first she didn't want to assume anything weird. She was still trying to be rational. But then she noticed something that made her skin crawl. Grandma was sitting on the edge of her bed, and the chair was about 1 meter away from her, and it was moving. And Grandma, Marlene, kept turning her head slowly, back and forth, looking at my mom, looking at the chair, looking at my mom, looking at the chair, like she was tracking something neither of them could see. So my mom, trying to ground it in reality, asked her, kind of lightly, like she was joking, "Ma, why are you pushing the chair like that?" And Grandma snapped back, totally serious. "What are you talking about? I'm not touching it. It's moving by itself." My mom said she tried to laugh, like a nervous little laugh, just to stop herself from spiraling. And then she crouched down, just to check if maybe Grandma's foot was nudging it. Maybe the angle made it look farther than it was. But when she ducked down, she saw it clearly. Grandma's legs were still, not even close, not reaching, not brushing it. And the chair was still moving. My mom stood up, ducked down again, like her brain needed a second viewing to accept it. Still moving. So she did the only thing she could think of. She called me into the kitchen like she needed help, like there was some emergency task that required another human being immediately. But I didn't go. I'm embarrassed saying that now because I had no idea. I just thought she was being dramatic or impatient. I was locked in on studying, and I remember thinking, why is she yelling? This can wait. Apparently, she kept calling me, sharper and sharper, and it turned into this desperate kind of angry, like panic disguised as frustration. Eventually, I stormed into the kitchen, annoyed, and I saw my mom's face. She looked wrong, like she'd seen something and didn't know how to put herself back together. But she forced normal, forced her voice to sound casual, forced everything. She didn't tell me what happened until after my exam, the next day. And when she finally did, she was almost shaking with it, like she'd been carrying it around inside her chest and couldn't hold it anymore. And of course, we tried to recreate it. We did everything. Sat where Grandma sat, placed the chair where it was, tried to reach it with our legs, tried different angles, different pressures, different floor positions. We even tried to see if maybe a draft could have pushed it. Nothing. Not even close. The chair had been too far, and it moved in a way that didn't match any normal cause we could find. We just ran out of explanations. Then the second incident happened about 10 days later. And this one still makes my blood go icy because it happened in broad daylight. Morning, around 9 a.m., a time when nothing scary is supposed to happen. The house was full, family members around, voices, movement, that normal people are awake and living life vibe. I was asleep in my room. My mom was sitting out in the hall on this hanging swing we had. From where she sat, she could see down the hallway and part of the path toward my parents' room. And she saw me. Or she saw someone who looked enough like me that her brain didn't question it. A girl walked past at a normal pace and went into my parents' room. Same height as me, same general build, wearing light-colored clothes, like a white top and shorts. My mom assumed instantly, "Oh, that's Lena." That's me, by the way, Lena. So she got up and followed, thinking maybe I'd woken up and gone in there for something. She checked the room. No one. No movement, no sound, empty. So she stepped back out and asked one of the family members, "Hey, did you see Lena go into the room just now?" And they looked at her like she was confused and said, "Lena's still asleep in her room." My mom said her mouth went dry because she knew what she saw. And then, as she tried to replay it in her head, one detail started screaming louder than the rest. The girl didn't have a face. Not like a blur you get when someone passes too fast. Like, the space where a face should be was blank, smooth, wrong. And the hair was shorter too. Not mine. Not how I wore it at the time. Just close enough to fool her for a second. And that second was all it took. Because after that, the entire house felt different to her. Like it wasn't just a house anymore. Like something else was moving through it, wearing familiar shapes. All I know is this. There are moments where reality feels thinner than it should. And those 2 mornings, one with a chair that moved with no hands, and one with a girl who looked like me, but wasn't me, are the moments that made me believe that sometimes something is there, even when you can't explain it. So, this happened in early summer of 2020. I was 14, and I still think about it way more often than I'd like to admit. It was one of those afternoons where the whole day feels glued in place, like the air is thick and time just drags. Sometime around 3-ish, maybe closer to 4. Outside, the sky had that bruised, dark color, and the rain was coming down hard, like it meant it. Thunder in the distance, wind pushing sheets of water sideways. Inside the house, it was dim. We'd just eaten, and everything had that sleepy, post-lunch quiet. My dad, well, my stepdad, technically, was passed out on the couch. His name is Rian. Strict. The kind of strict where you can feel the rules even when he's not talking. My mom was stretched out nearby with the lights off, scrolling on her phone like the storm was a movie playing on mute. And I was so bored I could have screamed. For a long time I'd had this dream, this stupid, cinematic little dream of longboarding in the rain. I know how that sounds, but in my head it was going to be magical, like I'd glide through the storm and feel like I was in my own music video or something. The problem was, Rianne would never let me, not in a million years. Wet roads, low visibility, cars, all of it. He would have shut it down instantly. But that day, he was asleep, deep asleep. And I remember this clear little thought clicking into place. This is it. This is my window. So I grabbed my longboard and slipped out. There's this road not far from my house, kind of a mountain road, the one I used to ride all the time. Long downhill stretch, totally isolated. It has this very specific feel, almost like it doesn't belong to the town. On the right side, it's just a rocky wall, straight mountain, hard and bare. On the left side, there's a fence, and beyond it, nothing safe. Just a sudden drop into thick trees, and if you keep looking down through the forest, you can spot a river way below. No houses, no sidewalks. No one just happens to be there. And because of the storm, I figured it would be empty, which honestly made it feel even more tempting. I had a routine there. I'd bomb the hill on the right side, reach the bottom, stop, check both directions for cars, because the road curves near the top and you can't always see what's coming, then cross and walk back up on the left side to do it again. So I did a run, then another. The rain kept hitting my face, and sometimes the wind would toss it right into my eyes. I remember blinking hard and forcing myself to be extra careful, like, don't be stupid, don't miss a car. I reached the bottom again and stopped like always. I looked to the right, nothing. Then I looked to the left, and my stomach just dropped. Because walking toward me from the top of the road was Rianne. No umbrella, no hood up, just marching down in regular outside clothes, definitely not what he'd been wearing asleep on the couch. And the way he walked, I can't explain it except to say it was heavy, fast, that angry parent stride that instantly says, you're in trouble. My heart started hammering like it was trying to escape. All I could think was, I'm done. I'm grounded forever. I'll never touch my board again. That thought made me panic even harder. I lifted my hand and waved, kind of automatically, like if I looked calm, maybe he'd be calm. Like I could soften the explosion before it happened. Then I turned my head to the right to cross the road and start walking toward him. And as soon as my foot stepped forward, something in me went, check again. So I turned my head back to the left, and he was gone. Just gone. And it wasn't like he ducked behind something. There was nowhere to duck. The mountain wall was flat rock. The fence was just fence, and beyond it was a steep drop into trees. The road itself had no side paths, no driveways, no buildings. And there wasn't enough time. There was no way a person could vanish that fast. I stood there frozen, rain dripping down my face, trying to force my brain to come up with a normal explanation. For a second I told myself, maybe you imagined it. But I didn't. I know what I saw. I'm not even being dramatic when I say I was completely sure. It was him. His shape, his clothes, his walk, the whole presence of him. Still, it felt impossible, so I decided to check. I walked up the hill slowly, scanning everything. Left, right, over the fence, up the rock wall like someone might be hiding in a crack. When I reached the top, the road was completely empty. No footsteps, no figure in the distance, nothing. I even leaned over the fence and stared down into the forest, half expecting to see, I don't know, a body? A jacket? Something that proved I wasn't losing it. There was nothing. So I turned around and went home immediately, soaked and quiet and shaken in this weird, buzzing way. And when I walked in, Rian was exactly where I'd left him, asleep on the couch. Same position, same clothes, like he hadn't moved an inch. My mom was still there too, still scrolling. I asked her, trying to sound casual even though my voice felt tight, "Did Rian go outside at all?" She looked up at me like I'd asked if the ceiling had opened. "No," she said. "He hasn't moved." And that was it. That was the whole thing. To this day, I don't know what I saw walking toward me in that rain. I don't know if it was my brain playing tricks, or some coincidence I can't explain, or something else. All I know is that the feeling of that moment, seeing him, panicking, looking away for 1 second, and then realizing he'd vanished, still creeps up on me sometimes when the weather turns dark. Like the storm kept a secret, and I accidentally stepped into it. So I was scrolling Instagram the other night, and I saw this meme, tons of likes, about how grandparent houses have that vibe when you're a kid. You know what I mean. The weird smells, the heavy furniture, the rooms you're not supposed to go in. And it hit me so hard that I just sat there thinking, okay, yeah, that wasn't just in my head. When I was little, my parents needed babysitters all the time. And my great-aunt and my great-grandparents were always willing to take me in. Always kind. Always happy to have me. I love them for it. I really do. But as a kid, I hated staying there. Not because they were mean. Never. It was the house. The feeling of it. Like the air was a little too still. Like the corners held on to things. For a bit of background, my great-grandparents had immigrated from the UK to Ontario when they were kids, sometime in the early 1930s, give or take. They grew up around Toronto, met as teenagers, fell in love fast, married young. Years later, my great-aunt, Aunt Marlene, was born, and eventually she married this guy who came with his own atmosphere. My great-uncle, I'll call him Gordon, was a bitter drunk from an old farming family. One of 11 siblings, crammed into this creaking mid-1800s farmhouse with barely enough bedrooms for half of them. And I swear, I'm not trying to sound dramatic, but I've always believed that old place wasn't just old. It felt occupied, like it stored something. Anyway, some of that energy followed them into my great-grandparents' home later on. Or maybe it was already there. Hard to explain. But there were two things in that house that absolutely messed with me as a kid. First, the dolls. My great-grandmother and Aunt Marlene both collected porcelain dolls when they were young, and eventually those dolls ended up in this basement room everyone casually called the guest room. Like it was normal. Normal. Meanwhile, there were dozens of these dolls lined up on shelves. Glassy eyes, tiny mouths, perfect hair. And no matter where you stood, it always felt like they were looking right through you. Not at you. Through you. And I know how that sounds. I do. But the energy in that room was wrong. Like cold electricity. Like standing too close to something that's quietly angry. Even now, as an adult, I can't be around porcelain dolls for long without feeling that same tightness in my chest. Second, the clocks. There were clocks everywhere. Not one per room, more like 2 or 3. And the worst part was that some of them didn't work properly. So you'd be lying there at night, and suddenly, out of nowhere, one would chime when it wasn't supposed to, or ring at the wrong hour, or clatter through a broken melody like it was half awake. And outside, there were wind chimes along the porch that would join in whenever the wind picked up. And together it made this kind of messy, haunted orchestra. But it wasn't even the noise that scared me the most. It was the silence after. That quiet would drop like a blanket. And every time it happened, I'd get this immediate, physical feeling, like something had been stirred up, like something was awake now, watching. And I just know, deep in my gut, that I had to get up, walk toward the stairs, keep my eyes forward, and go back to my room without turning around. Like turning around would be a mistake I couldn't undo. And yeah, if it ended there, you could say, okay, kid imagination, scary basement, creepy dolls. Fine. But then something happened years later that I still can't make fit into any normal explanation. After he died, I started visiting more again to help out, to be there. And the second I walked back into that house, it all came back. The same childhood feeling, like the walls remembered me. Over time, my grandmother's health declined. She's turning 100 this February, which honestly still blows my mind. And Aunt Marlene's getting up there too, late 70s now. They hired a young woman to help clean the place, someone with no connection to our family, no history, no stories, nothing. And one day, my grandmother and Aunt Marlene went out together, shopping, errands, whatever, and the cleaner arrived while the house was empty. When my family came home later, they found her sitting out on the porch, smoking, pale as a sheet. She looked at them and said, "I need to tell you something, and I don't know how to say it." She told them she had seen an old man come out of the thick brush behind the house. But here's the part that made everyone's skin go tight. She said he didn't walk. She said he glided, like he was moving forward without his feet doing the work. Smooth, quiet. And she said he had this warm smile on his face, gentle, almost comforting. And in the moment, it felt totally natural to her, like her brain just accepted it. Then a few seconds passed, and it was like she snapped back into herself, like waking up mid-dream. And she panicked, because she assumed some elderly man had wandered onto the property. So she ran to the front door and called out, asking if anyone was inside. Nothing. So she gathered her courage and searched the house room by room. Nobody. No doors opening, no footsteps, nothing. Just empty house. By the time my grandmother and Aunt Marlene got back, this woman was outside like she physically couldn't make herself go back in. And she described this fear that sounded exactly like the fear I'd felt as a kid after the clocks stopped chiming. That sense of being pushed out, like the house was telling you, "No, not right now. Get out." She described the man again, his face, his expression, the way he moved. And Aunt Marlene went quiet, like genuinely concerned. She walked to a closet, dug through some stored things, and pulled out a framed photograph, one that wasn't out on display at the time. She held it up and asked the cleaner, "Was it him?" And the woman's eyes went wide immediately. "Yes," she said, "that's him. It was my grandfather." And that's the thing. There weren't photos of him around then. The cleaner couldn't have studied his face and made up a story. She didn't even know who he was. Now it comes up at nearly every family gathering because nobody has a rational explanation that actually covers all of it. And I'm not saying I've got proof of anything. I'm not saying it's definitely paranormal. I'm just saying some places feel thin, like the world is layered there, like a doorway opens and closes without asking permission. And even now, fully grown, adult, bigger than I ever was back then, I still won't stay in that house overnight. Not for any amount of money. Not for nostalgia. Not for tradition. Because the second the clocks start singing at the wrong hour, I still feel like something is listening. Hey, so I don't tell this story to many people because I already know how it sounds. But it happened, and I still remember it like it's stitched into me. When I was 9, my mom and I moved into this weathered little house in a sleepy old mining town. It was just the two of us. Well, 3, if you count my cat Mabel. She was this chunky little tabby who acted like she owned every room the second we walked in. That first year, I couldn't sleep in my own bedroom. I'd try, but the minute the lights went out, my skin would prickle like it was leaning in too close. Mom didn't get impatient with me. She'd tuck me in, leave my door cracked open, and place Mabel right beside me like a furry little bodyguard. It worked, for maybe a week. One morning I woke up and my door was shut, fully shut, and Mabel was between me and the handle, low to the ground, staring like she was guarding it. When I tried to step around her, she blocked me. She actually blocked me, like a person would. I had to scoop her up and move her just to get out. It was such a small thing, but it felt wrong. Like someone had come into my room and decided how the morning would go. I walked out to Mom, ready to ask why my door had been closed. She looked at me, just froze for a second, and then she grabbed her phone. She didn't say, "What happened?" or "Did you do this?" She just took a photo of my neck and turned the screen toward me. There were marks, red, angry bruises shaped like hands. And they weren't kid hands. They were too big, too wide, too certain. I remember my stomach dropping so hard it felt like I'd swallowed a stone. From that day on, I slept in Mom's room. And then she started telling me things she hadn't wanted to say out loud before, like she was trying to protect me from it by keeping it unspoken. She said there were nights she'd check on me and I'd be sitting straight up in bed, eyes open, staring forward, mumbling nonsense. But I wouldn't respond because I wasn't really awake. Other nights, she'd wake up to the sound of me thumping my bed against the wall over and over, like I was trying to shove it into the corner. She tried to wake me on those nights. She said sometimes she couldn't, not properly, like I was locked behind my own eyes. This went on for months, and the bruises started showing up in new places. Hand-shaped bruises on my arms, long scratches along my ribs, little marks that looked like I'd been grabbed and held. Mom was exhausted and scared in a way I'd never seen before. Eventually, she stopped trying to explain it away and called in people, mediums, spiritual guides, anyone who might make sense of what was happening. The night they came, the house felt heavy, like the air had thickened. I was sitting alone in the living room with Mabel. It was dark except for moonlight pouring in through our big sliding glass door. The curtains were open because Mom liked the light. She said it made the room feel less closed in. I remember glancing toward the glass because I felt watched, like that instinct you get when someone's staring at the back of your head. And there it was. A face. A man's face, pale and faded, pressed against the glass from the outside. Not like a reflection, not like a trick of light. It looked flattened, as if the glass was the only thing stopping him from coming through. I didn't scream right away. I think my brain didn't know what to do with it. And then Mabel made this sound, this low, rough warning I'd never heard from her. And I ran. I ran straight to Mom and the guides and spilled it all out, shaking so hard I could barely breathe. They said our house sat on land that used to be an apple orchard, long before it was a neighborhood, before the town was what it became. They believed the spirit I saw belonged to a man who once owned that orchard. They also said he'd hurt people when he was alive, women and girls. They didn't go into details, but they didn't have to. The way Mom's hands clenched told me enough. And they believed he was focusing on me because I was in his space, on his land. They mentioned, too, that there were other spirits lingering, someone young, a mother who'd worked the orchard, and her little girl. Like they'd been trapped there, too, held under something cruel that wouldn't let them go. That was the house. But the neighborhood had its own kind of wrongness. My best friend Lacey lived a street over. There was a shortcut through a small patch of forest, just a dirt path between trees. I'd walked it 100 times in daylight without thinking twice. One evening, around dusk, I was walking home and staring at my feet like kids do, half daydreaming. Then I got this sudden, sharp feeling, like a command in my body. Stop and look behind you. I didn't want to. Everything in me begged not to. But I turned, and I saw something standing back along the path. It looked half human, half animal, wrong in its shape, wrong in how still it was. The eyes were what got me most. They didn't look like animal eyes. They looked aware, watching, waiting. I ran so hard my lungs burned all the way home. I avoided that path after that, until one day Lacey wanted me over for dinner. We'd played at my house, and it got late. Walking around the long way felt impossible, so she convinced me. She didn't know everything I'd seen, not really, but she knew enough to understand why my voice shook when I said I didn't want to go. We took the shortcut anyway. Halfway through, the forest went dead quiet. Not peaceful quiet, wrong quiet, like the world had paused. Even our footsteps sounded too loud. Lacey stopped first. She stared off into the trees and her face changed, like the blood drained out of it. She didn't say much, just grabbed my hand and yanked me forward, and we ran until we burst into her backyard like we were being chased. Inside her house, she finally told me what she'd seen, and it was the same thing. The same shape, the same wrongness, the same eyes. Now, this part is the hardest to say. A few months later, my mom died in that house. I can't even fully explain the panic of that morning. It was early, barely light outside, and I was a 9-year-old kid with no idea what to do except call for help and hope someone arrived fast enough. While the ambulance was on the way, I ran to Lacey's house because I didn't know where else to go. I needed her mom. I needed an adult. I needed someone who could take over because I was drowning. I got to the entrance of the forest path and froze. There was a line of them, those human-animal figures, standing along the side of the trail like they were posted there. Not moving, not speaking, just watching me. I remember thinking, I don't have time for this. I don't have time to be scared. So I ran anyway. I sprinted down that path like my life depended on it, because in a way, it did. I didn't look left or right. I didn't stop. I just ran until I was pounding on Lacey's door. Her mom pulled me in, held me, and then handled the paramedics when they arrived. She did what I couldn't. There was nothing they could do for Mom. After that, my dad came, and I moved across the country. New schools, new rooms, a whole new life that didn't carry the smell of old wood and moonlit glass. Sometimes people ask why I never went back. Sometimes they laugh a little, like it's a creepy campfire story. And I get it. I really do. If someone told me this and I hadn't lived it, I might struggle too. But I'm Australian, and I grew up hearing that land holds memory, that some places carry stories whether we want to believe them or not. That town was old, and it had a reputation long before we arrived. Miners, families, hardship, violence, loss. Layers and layers of it. All I know is this. Something in that place knew I was there, and for a long time, it didn't want to let me go. So, this happened maybe 6 or 7 weeks ago, and I'm still not over how real it felt. It was my first, truly my first, full sleep paralysis episode. I'd heard people talk about it, but I'd never experienced anything like that before. No scary movies, no creepy stories before bed, nothing. Just a normal night. I went to sleep around 11:40 p.m. Same routine as always. I remember feeling totally fine. No anxiety, no weird thoughts, nothing ominous. I fell asleep pretty quickly. And then, it's hard to explain unless you've been there, but I slipped into that half-awake, half-dream place. The kind where you feel like you're awake, but your brain is still floating in sleep. Out of nowhere, I got this intense feeling, like someone was staring at me. Not, I think someone's watching, but like this heavy, undeniable certainty that I was being watched right there. I remember thinking, okay, don't do this. Just go back to sleep. But then I heard sounds, right in my ears, like close, too close. It wasn't words exactly, more like whispery, sly little noises, like someone trying to get your attention without speaking clearly, kind of like a soft ps 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 ps, and this scratchy ksasa sound. It felt personal, like it was happening inches from my head, like someone was right beside me making these secret, plodding noises. That's when I tried to snap fully awake. Except, I couldn't. I tried to open my eyes wider. Nothing changed. I tried to move my arm, my fingers, my legs. Nothing. Not even a twitch. My whole body was locked down like it had been turned off. And the fear hit so fast it was like getting shoved underwater. I could move my eyes though. So I looked around as much as I could, and that's when I saw it. This dark shape right up near my face. Not like a clear person, more like a black, blocky shadow. A heavy, dark aura hovering in the space where my face and the air should have been. And it felt like it was there, like it had weight, like it was occupying the room with me. And the noises kept going. I remember panicking, but the panic was trapped inside me. Like my mind was screaming, and my body was just dead still. My heart was pounding, and I couldn't even take a satisfying breath. And in that moment, out of pure instinct, like muscle memory from faith, I started saying Jesus' name. Not out loud, because I couldn't, but in my head, over and over. Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. And I swear to you, the second I did that, instantly, it broke. Like a switch flipped. Suddenly I could move. I sucked in this huge breath. My limbs worked again, and the pressure in the room vanished. I grabbed my phone so fast just to ground myself in something real, and the time was around 1:35 a.m. I didn't even sit up right away. I just lay there frozen in a different way, wide awake, staring at the wall above me, heart racing like I'd just run for my life. I stayed like that for a few minutes, just letting the reality settle back into place. Eventually, I worked up the courage to get out of bed. I left the room and ended up sleeping somewhere else because I just couldn't be in that space anymore. Even though nothing was there, it felt like the room had betrayed me. The next day, I was shaken, like truly shaken, but I haven't had it happen again since. Afterward, I read up on sleep paralysis, and honestly, it matched the classic description almost perfectly. The paralysis, the feeling of a presence, the whispers or sounds right by the ear, and the shadowy, dark figure close to the face or body. And I saw a lot of people say prayer, or calling on Jesus, snapped them out of it fast, which still blows my mind because that's exactly what happened to me. So, this happened back in the early 2000s, when I was living in San Francisco with my boyfriend. His name was Dane, in this old, kind of grand but sad hotel that had been converted into apartments. The unit was weirdly designed. The bathroom wasn't tucked away like normal. It was raised up like a little platform right in the middle of the place. And underneath that elevated block were these roll-out beds. People called them molly beds, like the old-school trundle style. At night, Dane and I would pull our bed out and line it up next to these big windows that looked straight into the building next door. One night, the moonlight was so bright it felt like a spotlight, like the whole room was washed in silver. I remember waking up suddenly, just snapping awake, and at the exact same second, Dane jolted awake too. We didn't say anything at first. We just stared at each other in the glow, both of us wide-eyed. Like, "Did you feel that?" I didn't see anything, but I got this vague, creeping feeling under my skin. Like when you realize you're alone in a room, but your body doesn't fully believe it. The next morning, Dane told me he'd had the most vivid nightmare. He said an old woman was standing over him. He described her in this very specific way, balding, with long, stringy white hair hanging down, and this angry, almost hateful look on her face. He said she leaned over him like she was trying to pull something out of him. His energy, his life, whatever you want to call it. Like she wanted to take it and keep it for herself. And the thing is, he didn't just sound freaked out. He sounded wiped out. He said when he woke up, he felt exhausted, like something had physically drained him. I thought it was disturbing, sure, but I've never been the type to go straight to ghost. So I kind of brushed it off, like, okay, intense dream. Plus, Dane was very Northern California. You know what I mean. Very, maybe the universe is speaking through my sleep. Very that. A couple months later, my mom came to visit. She slept in the other roll-out bed in the adjacent little space. Everything seemed normal, and then the next day, out of nowhere, we got into this huge, irrational blowout fight. The kind of fight that doesn't even make sense while it's happening. We almost never fought like that, and looking back, I honestly think hormones and menopause were probably stirring the pot hard. But still, she left abruptly, like packed up and gone. And then, we didn't talk for almost a year. And no, I never told her about Dane's nightmare. It wasn't the kind of thing I would have shared with my mom at that point in my life. Not in a million years. Okay, now fast forward about 15 years. My mom and I are talking one day, just reminiscing, laughing about my old living situations, dumb boyfriends, all that. And I casually bring up that San Francisco apartment, and she goes, "Oh my God, that place was haunted." I swear I laughed at first. Like, sure, Mom. But then she looked dead serious and said she'd had the worst nightmare of her entire life there. She said an old woman, long, stringy white hair, was trying to strangle her. And she described it so vividly. In the dream, she was on the floor, even though in real life she'd been sleeping in the molly bed. She said the woman had her pinned down and was pressing her foot as hard as she could onto my mom's throat, like crushing her windpipe. And listen, this is the part that still makes my stomach drop. The second she said, "I had a nightmare," my whole body went cold, like ice water down my spine. Even before she described the woman, I just knew. And when she finally did, and it matched Dane's description, balding, stringy white hair, that aggressive presence, I felt this deep, stunned horror. Because what are the chances? Two people, years apart, never told each other, both dreaming the same terrifying figure in the same apartment? I still don't have an explanation. I'm not someone who jumps to paranormal conclusions. I'm really not. But I can't deny how specific and identical their descriptions were. And the only other off things I can remember from living there weren't dramatic. They were subtle, almost mundane. Like when I was alone in the apartment reading or just hanging out, I'd sometimes get this feeling like being in a dentist waiting room. You know that sensation where you can kind of tell people are looking at you, but it's not warm, not friendly, not hostile, just watching. And somehow it made the loneliness feel sharper. And I hated going down to the basement laundry room. I can't even explain why. I just dreaded it. Like my whole body would tense up before I even hit the stairs. So, yeah, I don't have a neat ending. No big revelation. Just this one place, this bright moonlight, two separate nightmares that shouldn't match. and that cold certainty in my body the moment my mom started describing the same woman. Even now, when I think about it, I still get that chill. So, picture this. Our fire investigation office was tucked inside an old fire station that had been shut down years earlier and folded into a newer house across town. The building itself was a real piece of history, built back in 1917. My grandma used to tell me that when she was a kid, she'd wait for the school bus right out front of that very station. Same sidewalk, same curb. That always made the place feel personal somehow, like it had roots in our family even before I ever worked there. And of course, with a building that old, there were stories. The biggest one was always the back steps. People swore someone died there, either a firefighter or maybe just a civilian. Nobody ever seemed sure about the details, but the rumor that stuck was that it happened after a poker game went bad. Back then, the old-timers practically lived at the station anyway. They didn't have those modern schedules. The way the older guys told it, they were working something like 5 or 6 straight 24-hour shifts with only one Kelly day off each week. So yeah, whatever people did at home to pass the time, eating, sleeping, playing cards, they did it there. So the place had a reputation. Haunted was the word everyone used, half joking, but not completely. Eventually, our department added a brand new wing onto the original structure. More offices, a big meeting room, and an interview room. The addition connected to the old building right near those back steps everyone talked about. Before that expansion, the weird stuff was mostly small, easy to shrug off things. The basement door would unlatch and crack open by itself sometimes, or you'd set something down in the kitchen and turn around and it'd be somewhere else a minute later. And it wasn't like that door was loose. It had a simple hook and eye latch that should have stayed put. Nothing that made you run out screaming, just enough to make you pause. Once we moved into the new section, the old side was mostly kitchen and storage. Every now and then, someone would still use the original front door, especially if a car was parked where the old engine bay doors used to be. But that part of the building felt like it was slowly becoming a forgotten corner. Then came the night that did it for me. It was an evening shift, quiet, the kind of shift where the air feels like it's holding its breath. My partner, Marty, and I were working. I was sitting at the desk in the new lobby area, and from where I was, I could see up into the old section. The lights were on up there, firehouse habit, you know? In our city, the lights stayed on in the common areas pretty much all the time. I remember hearing the old front door open. Then it shut. Right after that, I heard someone whistling. Not a faint little noise either, clear as day. Like a person walking around, killing time, just casually whistling some tune they'd been carrying in their head all day. And I didn't even get nervous at first. I just thought, oh, Marty's back. Maybe he stepped out and came in through the old door. No big deal. So I waited to see him come around the corner. But he didn't. The whistling kept going, steady, almost relaxed. After a couple minutes, I started thinking, why is he still up there? And then another thought hit me. Who whistles like that while they're on the phone? It didn't sound like someone talking to anybody. It sounded like someone alone. Finally, I got tired of guessing. I stood up and started walking toward the old section, heading up those steps, the same steps that used to lead out the back. And the moment my boot touched the top step, the whistling stopped. Just dead stopped, like somebody had reached over and flipped a switch. Nothing. So I kept walking, slower now, toward the room where the old front door opened. When I got there, it was empty. No one. Not in the hallway, not tucked into the kitchen, nowhere to step out from behind. I checked the front door. Still deadbolted. And that's the moment my stomach dropped, because I know what I heard. That door opened. That door closed. Someone was whistling. and now there was absolutely nobody there who could have done it. I didn't investigate further. I didn't check one more room. I didn't stand there trying to be brave. I turned around and quick walked back down into the news section like my life depended on it. I grabbed my radio, my notepad, my truck keys, hands moving fast like my brain was trying to outrun what just happened. I walked out the new front door, locked it up, got in my truck, and only then did I call Marty. When he answered, I asked him where he was. And he goes, real casual, "Had to run home for a minute." Home was about half an hour away. I just sat there gripping the steering wheel and told him, "Yeah, I'm heading home too." After that night, things didn't get dramatic. No apparitions, no shadows lunging at you, nothing like that. But the small stuff picked up again. Things falling off shelves when nobody was near them, that basement latch clicking open, that same slow creak of the door giving way. But we never heard the whistling again. And from that day forward, any time I had to stop by the office in the dead hours, 2, 3, 4 in the morning, to drop off samples or pull something off the computer, I didn't hang around. I did what I came to do, and I left. No wandering, no extra trips, and I never looked up those steps into the old section again. Nothing ever happened in the new addition. Not once. It was almost like whatever was tied to that place, whatever history had soaked into those old walls, it just wouldn't cross over into the newer part of the building. And honestly, I was perfectly fine with that, because even though nothing about it felt evil, from that night on, any time I had to go anywhere near that old section, I got that same tight, uneasy feeling, like I was somewhere I wasn't invited, and something up there knew it. You know how some houses feel like they're holding their breath? When I was about 7, my family moved into this huge 3-story rose-pink house in Vancouver, an old Victorian place from the late 1800s, with creaky stairs and that quiet, heavy kind of air. At first it felt like an adventure, but pretty quickly it became complicated. My dad was around at the beginning, but he traveled back and forth for work. He ran a business overseas, so most of the time it was just my mom, me, and my sister. And my mom hated that house. Not in a dramatic way either, more like it got under her skin. We were in this sleepy neighborhood where everything was too still, and she didn't really know anyone. No friends, no family nearby, and a country that still felt unfamiliar to her. I think she felt trapped in silence. So eventually she decided to rent out the basement suite. It was basically its own apartment. Kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, the whole thing. A woman moved in with her boyfriend. Her name was Tia, just a bright, friendly person who didn't seem bothered by the house at all. She had 2 cats, and I still remember their names because they mattered later. Rico and Pepe. My sister was allergic, like properly allergic, but that didn't stop her. She played with those cats constantly, brushing them, feeding them, pretending they were royalty. And honestly, those cats made the house feel warmer, like something living and good had finally settled into it. A few years passed, and my family moved back overseas for a while to be closer to my dad. Then, about a year later, we returned to Vancouver and moved right back into the same house like nothing had changed. Same stairs, same quiet. Same basement tenants, same cats. And then one day, Pepe was hit by a car. It happened so suddenly. One minute he was part of our daily life, and the next he was just gone. My sister and I were wrecked. It sounds dramatic, but when you grow up alongside a pet, especially one you've sort of claimed as your own, losing them feels like losing a little piece of your childhood. Not long after that, we moved to a smaller house in a busier area. Better schools, more people, less of that eerie quiet. And a few weeks later, Tia moved out too. New apartment, more space, fresh start. Before we fully closed that chapter, my mom took my sister and me back to the old house to clean up and grab whatever we'd left behind. Because the new place was smaller, my mom laid down a rule. 1 toy each. Just one. My sister chose this plush cat, of course. I remember holding it up like it was a prize. I wandered around trying to decide, and that's when I found it. A small wooden mannequin, one of those posable art models with stiff joints and a smooth carved head. It was sitting there like it had been forgotten on purpose. Tia had taken everything else, but the mannequin was left behind. And I know this will sound strange, but I felt drawn to it. Not in a happy way, more like something tugged at me, like, take this. I didn't even really want it, yet I picked it up anyway, almost reluctantly, and that became my one toy. At first, nothing happened. I put it in the living room, tucked into a corner facing the window. My sister thought it was funny and started making little outfits for it using tissues and scraps of fabric. It became this quirky little decoration people commented on when they came inside, like, "Oh, cute," and "Where'd that come from?" Then the marks started. Faint scratches on the wall. Not deep, barely even damaging the paint, but they were there. Thin little lines, like someone dragging a claw lightly across the surface. Later, there were tiny dents in the wooden stairs. Just small bruises in the wood that would appear and disappear in different spots. It made me feel comforted. And I convinced myself it was Pepe, like he'd followed us. Like maybe he wasn't ready to leave, and somehow that mannequin had become his anchor. Honestly, that idea made me feel better, so I held on to it. Then we started smelling cat fur around it, this dusty, warm, unmistakable animal smell, like you'd hugged a cat and it stayed on your sweater. But there were no cats in our new house. One night, my sister decided she didn't want it in the living room anymore and moved it into her bedroom. She told me she wanted to keep an eye on it, like she was joking, but she also wasn't. That night she woke up and saw something. She described it as a figure, soaked in darkness, like it was wearing shadow. Red eyes, 3 fingers. She said it was leaning over her bed, close enough that it felt like the air changed. And then it turned and walked toward our mom's room. My sister sprinted to wake my mom up, shaking and crying. My mom, half asleep, just insisted it was a nightmare. Imagination. Stress. So the next night, I put the mannequin in my room instead. It was raining hard, the kind of rain that taps on the window like fingertips. I remember lying there feeling this strange warmth, like someone had turned a heater on inside my chest. I slept fine. No nightmares, no figure, just that steady, comforting feeling. A few days later, my mom told me to move it back downstairs, so I did. But the house never really settled again. At night, we'd hear scratching and knocking from downstairs. Quiet at first, then more distinct, like someone tapping wood with nails. We kept finding more of those faint scratches, some hidden behind furniture, some halfway up the wall like something had reached. And my sister and I would catch the mannequin moving in the corner of our eyes. An arm slightly raised, a leg angled differently, the pose subtly changed. Every time my sister noticed, she'd go stiff with fear. Every time I noticed, I felt calm. I kept telling myself it was Pepe, like he was still with us, like he was watching over us in his own weird way. About a year later, we moved back overseas again. Before we left, my mom invited Tia over as a goodbye. She brought Rico and a new cat named Tessa. And Rico kept drifting toward the mannequin. Not once, not twice, over and over. He'd sit near it for long stretches, staring, tail flicking, like he was waiting for something to happen. It made my stomach feel tight, but I still didn't let go of my story. It's Pepe. It's just Pepe. I brought the mannequin with me when we moved. I packed it like it was fragile and precious, I carried it around like a weird little companion. My mom, though, my mom had always been sensitive to things like that. She read tarot, practiced fortune-telling, trusted her instincts about energy, and she hated the mannequin. She said it felt wrong, like a bad door left cracked open. She begged me to throw it out. I refused. Then, on our second day in the new house overseas, it disappeared. I'm not saying I misplaced it. I'm saying it was gone. I tore through my room, the luggage, drawers, closets, under beds. Nothing. Like it had dissolved. And after that, things were quiet for months, almost peaceful. Nearly a year later, while we were packing to move back to Vancouver again, I found it. It was tucked inside a drawer beneath a windowsill, placed neatly like someone had put it there intentionally. When I picked it up, I felt this sudden pulse shoot through me, like a shock, but not painful, just strong, immediate, familiar. And even though every part of me felt reluctant, I brought it back to Canada again. When we arrived, my mom refused to let it sit in the living room, so my sister and I made this bargain. We'd each spend one night with it in our rooms and then decide what to do. My sister went first. That was it for me. That same day, I took the mannequin and shoved it into a storage closet in the basement. I did everything I knew how to do. Burned incense, used oils, put out crystals, tried to cleanse the air like my mom taught me. I didn't want to fight it. I just wanted it contained, quiet, gone. And for a while, it worked. Life moved on. School, friends, routines. Every once in a while, I'd check the closet like you'd check a locked door. And it stayed there. For 2 years, nothing dramatic happened. Then my sister and I got into private school in New York, and we prepared to move again. On the day I went downstairs to grab the mannequin, because part of me still felt weirdly responsible for it, I opened the closet. It was empty. No mannequin. No dust outline. Nothing shoved behind boxes. Just gone. Like it had decided it was done with me. I never saw it again. Now I live in New York, and I'm doing fine. My family doesn't talk about it, not really. Like we all silently agreed it belonged to a different life. But sometimes, usually late at night, when the city is quieter than it should be, I think about that mannequin. About the scratches and the dents and that cat fur smell that shouldn't have existed. About my sister's red-eyed figure. About Rico staring like he recognized something. And I get chills every single time. Because I still don't know what it was. I want to believe it was Pepe, but if I'm being honest with you, I'm not sure it ever was. Okay, so I'm gonna sound a little dramatic, but I swear I'm not trying to be. I'm genuinely kind of panicking. So it was my brother Dylan's birthday last night, and my whole family came over. Normally we'd do it at his place, but I moved into a bigger house last spring, and Dylan kept joking, like not even joking, that I owe him a party here because there's more space for everyone. So, yeah, my house became party central. And Dylan has kids. My aunt brought my younger cousins. Well, technically cousins, but they're in that loud, chaotic 12-ish age range where they travel in packs. And after an hour, they started doing that thing kids do where they're bored, but also somehow sprinting and screaming at the same time. I had this random old set of walkie-talkies in a drawer. No idea why I kept them. So I was like, okay, you guys want a game? Let's do hide and seek, but you have to use these. Because when I was a kid, that was the best. Like you felt undercover. Agent vibes. So the kids are running around with them all night, whispering into them, giggling, playing spy, whatever. Everything's normal, cute even. Then after cake, my niece comes up to me and goes, "Auntie, the walkie-talkies are broken." And I'm like, "Yeah, Honestly, they probably are. Because these things are ancient. I think my ex, Mara, left them behind when we split up a couple years ago, and I just shoved them in a drawer and never dealt with them. You know when something is so small you don't throw it out, but you also don't want to think about it? That. So I take them from my niece and I'm messing with the buttons, and I realize one of them is missing. Like it was a set of 5, and I can only find 4 on the kitchen counter. And while I'm standing there holding one, it starts picking up a transmission. At first I'm like, oh, one of the kids still has the other one. Because obviously. But then the sound changes, and it's not talking, it's beeping. Like this slow, deliberate, beep, beep, beep pattern. And I don't know why, but my stomach kind of dropped. Because it sounded like Morse code. And then it hits me that it's doing SOS. So I'm standing in my kitchen, holding this dusty walkie-talkie, and I'm listening to SOS. 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 I call my parents over, like, okay, tell me I'm imagining this. And my dad, he used to do logistics and long-haul stuff back in the day, always had radios around. He listens for maybe 10 seconds and goes, that's definitely SOS. Which is already terrifying, right? But then he goes, wait, hold on. Do you hear that? And I'm like, hear what? And he points out something I somehow didn't notice at first. There's talking under the beeps. Like background noise. People. A room. Movement. So now I'm thinking, okay, so someone is sending SOS and they're in a crowded place? Like a store? A street? A party? And that's weird enough on its own. But then we listen closer. Like, really close. And I'm not kidding. We realize the background noise sounds exactly like our background noise. Like, the party. We could tell because we'd hear a laugh in the walkie-talkie, and then, like a second earlier, we'd heard that same laugh in the living room. We'd hear someone say, oh my God, stop, in the walkie-talkie, and we'd already heard it in real life, just barely before. It's like the walkie-talkie was replaying my house back to me, inside my house, at my brother's birthday party. So at that point I'm like, okay, someone's messing with me. It has to be one of the kids being creepy, or Dylan being annoying, or, honestly, somebody found a way to make it echo. I don't know. I'm trying to keep it light because I do not want to freak everyone out. So I just shut them off. And then, once the house is finally quiet, I turn them back on, just to prove to myself it was nothing. And it starts again. SOS. Same rhythm, same channel, same weird, faint background audio. Except now, there's no party. It's just my house. And I can't figure out where it's coming from because the missing walkie-talkie is still missing. I searched couch cushions, the bathroom, the pantry. Like I'm telling you, I checked the recycling bin. Nothing. And here's the part that is making me feel actually sick. When I talk out loud, I can hear myself on the transmission, like faintly behind the beeps. If I turn on the TV, I hear the TV in the background. If I walk to the other side of the house and speak, I can still hear myself, like it's picking me up from somewhere, but I can't tell where. It's like it's trapped in the walls or the vents or something, and it's just listening. And over the last hour, it's been getting quieter, like it's moving farther away, or the battery's dying, or it's getting buried under something. Right now, when I hold the walkie-talkie up to my ear, it's almost too faint to make out, but it's still there. Just this tiny, stubborn SOS. And I'm sitting here in my own house, feeling like I'm being watched by a toy from a drawer. So yeah, that's where I'm at. I don't know if this is some normal radio interference thing, or if one of the kids hid it somewhere and it's bouncing through vents, or if I'm about to find something I really don't want to find. But I am officially freaked out. Like, what would you do right now? Because I'm honestly staring at my hallway like it's gonna blink at me. So, I should probably start by saying I'm not the kind of person who jumps to ghosts. I'm skeptical to my bones. I'm the there's always a logical explanation type. Drafty window, weird plumbing, half-asleep brain making stuff up, whatever. I'd rather blame my house or my sleep before I blame the paranormal. But the last few weeks have been oddly specific, and it's starting to get under my skin. It began one night when I was in bed with my kids. Pretty normal around here. We'd all piled in, the room was quiet, and I was right on the edge of falling asleep. Then all of a sudden, I got this strange, tickly sensation along the back of my neck, like someone was leaning in close enough that every hair on my arms and back stood up. Here's the part that's hard to explain. I didn't feel fear exactly. It was more like awareness. Like my body noticed something before my brain did. And instead of panicking, I remember stretching my neck a little, almost like I was offering it to whatever it was. And then I just fell asleep. That night I slept terribly. I kept drifting in and out, and I could have sworn I heard slow footsteps somewhere in the house. Not loud, not stomping, just the steady, casual sound of someone walking around like they belonged there. Then sometime around 3-something in the morning, I woke up to the distinct smell of food cooking, like something warm and buttery, the kind of smell that makes you think, oh, someone's in the kitchen. I laid there, fully awake now, trying to work through the obvious stuff. Did I leave a burner on? Did something fall onto the stove? Am I dreaming? But the smell was strong. Strong enough that I finally got up and checked. Nothing. The stove was off. No heat, no pan, no food. And the weirdest part? The smell didn't seem to be anywhere else in the house. It wasn't drifting down the hall or lingering in the living room. It was like it existed for me in that moment, and then didn't. I got back into bed, still unsettled, trying to shake it off. And then I heard what sounded like my son's bedroom door closing. Not a creak, not a gentle nudge. A firm, unmistakable click of a door being shut. Except, my son was in bed with me. I sat straight up, heart thumping, and went to check. His door was still open. Everything looked normal. The whole house had that sleeping, unmoving feeling. So I stood there for a second, embarrassed at myself, and told myself the same thing I always do. You were half asleep. Your brain is playing tricks. Let it go. And I really did. Until a few days later. It was early morning, around 6-ish, and once again my kids were all in bed with me. We were just waking up, that soft, groggy time when everyone's still warm and half-tangled in blankets. That's when I heard it. The clear sound of one of them hopping off the bed and running into my bathroom. I even turned my head automatically, expecting to see a little shape darting away. But all 3 kids were still right there. Right beside me. No one had moved. And in that exact moment, like the timing was too perfect to ignore, my 4-year-old, Lila, suddenly popped upright and said, clear as day, "Mom, I just saw little Lila." I remember blinking at her because I didn't even know what that meant. And she goes, "She was standing by the bed watching us sleep, and when I tried to grab her, she ran away." My stomach dropped. I asked her what little Lila looked like, and she told me she looked like her, but smaller, like a toddler version. like a baby. I didn't push it after that. I didn't want to plant ideas or scare her. And honestly, I still didn't feel that heavy, dread-filled, haunted house feeling people talk about. Nothing like that. Just this creeping sensation that something was off. Then last night, Lila brought it up again on her own. She said, little Lila was trying to talk to me, but I didn't answer because I was trying to sleep. And then she added, really casually, she wanted to get in bed with us, but there wasn't room. I felt my skin go cold. I asked her where she'd been standing, and Lila pointed, right to the edge of the bed, right near my head. And that was the moment my skepticism started to crack. Not because I suddenly believed in monsters or demons or whatever, but because now it wasn't just me half asleep hearing things. Now my kid was describing something, interacting with her. And I don't like that. Then today, just to add another layer, we left the house for a couple hours, ran some errands, did normal life stuff. When we came back, the house was sweltering. The heater was set way higher than we ever set it, like ridiculously high. And I know I didn't touch it. My kids don't mess with it, and even if they wanted to, they can't reach the controls. So here I am, the skeptical person who's trying to line everything up into a neat, rational explanation. But it's starting to feel like the neat explanations are getting harder to hold on to. And I'm not saying, this is definitely paranormal. I'm saying, I don't know what it is, but I know what it feels like. Like something is quietly testing the edges of my home. Like it's comfortable. Like it wants attention. Like it's getting bolder because we keep trying to shrug it off. And maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's sleep, stress, old house noises, heating system glitches, imagination. But if it's not, if any part of it is real, then I want it gone. Especially if it's choosing my daughter as someone to talk to. So this happened back in January 2025, and I still get that prickly goosebump feeling when I think about it. That night, my mom and I were in the living room, doing what we always did when we found a show we loved. Curled up, totally hooked on this dramatic telenovela. We kept saying, okay, one more episode. And suddenly it was after midnight, creeping toward 1 a.m. before we finally decided we should sleep. I went to my room as quietly as I could. My little girl was asleep earlier that week in my bed, and my dog was right there too, my sweet boy Sammy, tucked in like he owned the place. I remember trying not to make the mattress bounce while I pulled up my blanket and slid in beside them. I had barely settled, like I wasn't even fully asleep, more like that foggy space where your eyes are heavy, but your mind is still kind of listening. And then I heard my bedroom door open. Clear as day, I heard my sister's voice, urgent and shaky, calling my name like something was wrong. The tone was pure panic, like she was trying to warn me. Instantly, my heart kicked up, and before I could even speak, something yanked my left arm, hard. Not a gentle tug, a real pull that jolted me upright. I snapped my eyes open, and I was sitting there in this half-upright position, and I could still feel the pressure on my arm, like fingers had just let go. And then Sammy, he started growling. Not his normal, someone's at the door growl either. This was low, deep, warning. He was staring at the doorway like he could see something standing there. His whole body was stiff. He kept that growl going for a long time. Long enough that I started watching the door too, afraid to even blink, because the room looked empty, but he was reacting like it wasn't. Eventually, I don't even know how, I fell asleep again. I didn't tell my mom the next morning. I think part of me wanted to pretend it didn't happen, like if I didn't say it out loud, it wouldn't be real. But then the next night, it happened again. We stayed up late again, still glued to that show, and this time we didn't turn in until around 2 a.m. I went back to my room, but that night my daughter was sleeping in her own bed. It was just me and Sammy. I remember getting under the blanket and lying face down, exhausted. Sammy was asleep near the headboard, curled up in his little spot. I looked over at him, felt a little calmer, and closed my eyes. And I swear to you, not even 10 seconds went by. My bedroom door opened. This time, it sounded like my mom. She was calling my sister's name, frantic, rushing closer like something terrible had happened. I could hear her voice moving toward the bed. And then, this is the part that makes my stomach turn. Even her voice started to sound wrong, like it stretched and warped, like a recording slowing down, almost distorted. And then I felt it. Something grabbed my sheet and tugged it, and at the same time something clamped around my foot and lifted it. I froze, like my whole body locked up instantly. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I couldn't even scream at first because I felt too shocked, too trapped inside my own skin. Behind me, Sammy erupted into growling again. Angry, protective, like he wanted to lunge but didn't know what he was dealing with. I forced myself to move, and the second I reacted, this icy cold sensation washed over my foot, like something had just been holding it. The sheet had been pulled halfway up my calf. Sammy kept growling, and the room looked completely empty. But I knew something had been there. The next day, my mom told me she'd been having horrible nightmares both nights. Really dark, disturbing ones. And that's when I finally told her everything. The voices, the door, the pulling, the grabbing, all of it. She got really quiet, and then she said something that made my skin crawl even more. She said she thought it might have been something evil. So we did the only thing we knew to do. For 21 nights, we prayed Psalm 91 before bed. Every single night, no skipping. We prayed like we meant it. And after that, it stopped. I've never had anything that intense happen to me again, but I'll never forget how real it felt, how it could touch me, pull me, grab me like it had weight and intention. Even now telling you this, I get chills.